There's many other lawyers there.
Yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're actually live now, so if everyone can quieten down and take a seat. Right. Okie dokie. Welcome, everybody. I hope you've all had a very refreshing summer break. Before we start, I need to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Please also note that all remote participants are muted at the outset of the meeting and are only able to speak at my invitation. Please raise your virtual hand if you wish to speak, and then only unmute when I invite you to make your contribution. As chair, I may ask that you are muted if you do not participate in this way. Item number 1, apologies for absence. Joyce Barrow is being substituted by Councillor Jeff Anderson. Vicky Mullick is being substituted by Roy Allcroft. David Minery is being substituted by Heather Kidd. And Andrew Sherrington is being substituted by David Basma. So at this point, I'm actually going to go around the table so everyone can introduce themselves so that everyone knows who's here. If I start with Julian actually is a member of the committee, but he comes along to listen in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Julian Dean, the Green Group member.
Okay, Robert.
Sorry. Robert Macy, Port Holland, Luther Foxton, and Strong. Councillor Watkins in for Cheswood.
Councillor Roger Evans, member for the London Division.
Brigsby Dartnell, Basin Hill, Colham and Sutton.
Tony Parsons, councillor for Basin Hill, Colham and Sutton.
Jeff Anderson, councillor for Holscombe.
Tom Biggins, member for Whitchurch North.
David Basma, councillor for Ansdale and Shrewsbury.
Heather Kidd, councillor for Cherbury Worthing.
Roy Allcroft, a member for Market Drayton East and Rural.
Dan Thomas, member for Russwellock.
Jane Fulton, Council's Executive Director of Resources and 151 officer.
And we should have Andy Bagley, the Chief Exec, but he's perhaps running a little bit late.
I think he's on leave today.
Oh, he's still on leave, so he won't be here. Okay, fine. And my name's Claire Wild. I'm councillor for the Severn Valley, and I'm chairing the meeting today.
I'm Tom Dodd, I'm the Council Scrutiny Manager.
Braddock, the Scrutiny Officer. Ashley Kendrick, Democratic Services Officer.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Item number 2 is disclosable pecuniary interest. Does anybody have anything they wish to declare at this point? No. If anything comes up, please feel free to mention it during the meeting. Item number 3 is minutes of the previous meeting. And I think Councillor Biggins has got a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the minutes, under item 19, financial strategy, there was concern was raised regarding communication with officers, and it was felt that there should be an agenda item for automation at the next meeting, to which the head of service for automation and technology would be invited. I don't think there's an item on the agenda.
Now, I did speak to officers about this, Tom, and if everyone's content, what we thought the best way to deal with this is to actually have a member briefing rather than having an agenda item. Then hopefully we can get more people to attend. Is everyone happy with that? Yep.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to draw everyone's attention to is just prior to the meeting, you were all emailed out the actions from the Transformation and Improvement Scrutiny on the 3rd of June. Is everyone happy they've seen that, from content with that?
I haven't had a chance to see that, Chairman.
Have you not?
No,
Yeah, I've seen it, but there was not
No,
enough time to
I
go
would
through it.
read it first.
Would you like, would a paper copy suffice, or would you like to actually have a couple of minutes to actually read it?
A couple of minutes to read it, Jeff.
What about you, Rosemary?
Yeah, I'm happy to read it. I opened it and saw that it was quite a detailed
Okay,
item.
so can we just agree the minutes before we have a couple of minutes break for that? Is everyone else content with the minutes? I propose.
I had a question on the minutes following councillor
Right, okay.
Biggins in, and that is in the minutes from the July the 15th. There was a paragraph there which says, and I wondered if there was any update on it. In response to a query regarding costs and voluntary redundant scheme, the Executive Director of Resources advised that costs were being finalised and would be reported as soon as possible. Members were also advised that there would be another voluntary redundant scheme and that the organisation was working to minimise the impact of redundancies. And it's that first sentence. Advised that costs were being finalised and would be reported as soon as possible. Where are we? I don't know if you can answer it today, but maybe send it around members when it is, or give some indication.
James, would you like to answer that?
I can do, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the voluntary redundancy figures, the vacancy removal and all of the resizing work in its entirety, that's been worked through in detail. It's very much overlapping. So we are planning to report all of that within the Q2 monitor at the latest.
Okay. So, are you content now to accept the minutes? Can I have a proposer, please? Rob,
Second.
Tony, right, all those in favour? Thank you. So, what I propose we do now is actually, can we stop the meeting for 5 minutes for Roger to read this paperwork? Is that all right? Are you going to actually take us off live, or are we going to stay live?
Yeah, there'll be a holding screen, just say we'll.
Right, okay. If you do that, we'll have 5 minutes for Roger to
No, like Jack.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I just, before we move on to agenda item 4. I
Again,
just-
I have a couple of questions concerning that report, if we're approving it or follow up to it. Are we doing it? Because there are some actions there which I thought are still outstanding. So when will we be informed?
Well, I think probably that should come under the performance report with Rob Macy. So I think we should take it there. That seems to be
Okay.
the most
Yeah,
sensible place.
yeah. There are some actions there, I think, which are still outstanding. I just wondered where we were.
Yeah, okay, so we'll deal with that when we come to
Okay.
that item. So if we could introduce everyone on screen, please. If you could introduce yourself and just tell us what your title is, please. Gwilym, if you would like to start.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Gwilym Butler, Cabinet Member for Finance, Corporate Resources and Communities.
Thank you. Dean, do you want to go next?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dean Carroll, Cabinet Member for Housing and Assets.
Thank you. I think Ben's next on the screen there.
Good morning, everybody. Ben Jay, Assistant Director for Finance and Technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy is next, I think.
Morning, Tracy Bennett, Data and Reporting Lead.
Thank you. And next is Laura.
Morning, Laura Carlos, Performance Officer.
Thank you. And I think that's Rachel, is it? Next, last one.
No.
It's just a team thing, so Rachel isn't joining us today. No,
She may be.
she may be. Okay, so that's everybody. Okay, thank you very much indeed. So item number 4 is public questions, and there are none. Item number 5 is member questions, and there are none. Item number 6 is the financial monitoring report, Q1 24-25. And if I just draw members' attention to the fact that this is a corrected report that was actually put on the website on Thursday, the 5th of September. You have got the right report on the agenda, but just for clarification. So I'm going to start by asking James if he'd like to say anything, and then I'll pass over to Gwilym. James, would you like to kick off?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the financial monitoring report for Q1, so period 3 up to the end of June. The figures taken from that period are then projected forward to give us an indication of the end of year position. Jumping to the headline, the central scenario, central assumption, best proposal in terms of those projections is an overspend of £38.5 million, which is a significant overspend for the authority, and is certainly not where we would be hoping to be by the end of the year. But given the current position, that's where the projection falls. There's a couple of things to pick up within that overall projection. Firstly, there is some detail listed within table 4, which is on page 8 of the pack, which breaks down that overspend across all of the various service areas. That overspend comes to £44 million, but then there is the exercise around resizing, which I alluded to earlier in response to an earlier question, which we're currently estimating to be around about £5.5 million. That £5.5 million will be worked through in detail and will be allocated into each of the directorates to reduce their overspend figures. And that will be included by period 6, which is the Q2 monitor. Taking into account those estimates in total, that gives us the £38.5 million overspend as it stands. So compared to general fund balance, this leaves us with a very, very small general fund balance, certainly too low for us to be in any way comfortable with that level of overspend. The other major point to pick out in the report, which has been added in, is on page 5, and this was actually the part that was corrected. And this is a breakdown of a favourable, the central and the adverse scenario. So what we've tried to do is to look at those projections in a slightly different way and look to see over the 7 major categories identified within the financial risk of the authority, across those 7 characteristics, what would be a favourable and an adverse scenario in each of those. So that's worked through in terms of where we are in terms of delivering savings, the impact of demand pressures, particularly within adults and children's social care, any other unbudgeted pressures that may fall across the authority outside of those 2 main areas, a consideration of the capital receipts position for the authority, given that there is significant delivery of capital receipts required to enable the funding of the transformation measures which are in place this year. The 5th one is external factors, so any external elements that we have not factored into our projections. Item 6 is around project risks, and then finally the risk of the overall cash position of the authority impacting on the revenue. So across a favourable scenario, those figures come out at an overspend of £25 million, and in a adverse scenario that could be as far as £74 million. The central scenario is drawn from the middle of that chart, showing how the figures that make up the projections that we put forward are shown. The rest of the report then is quite an extensive report, goes into the detail of the savings delivery and the under and overspend identified within each individual service area, and then the appendix it shows a breakdown service by service, team by team in terms of where those fall. And just to draw attention finally to table 5A and 5B, which is a breakdown of the overall position that we're looking at for the authority. So just to be clear, the savings that we delivered last year, the savings that were approved at the end of last year in February 2024 for this financial year was £62.5 million. On top of that, as again has been reported, there was an offset in terms of demand management growth within adults and children, 6.8 million. And when the analysis was completed in terms of the savings delivery for last year, taking into account those savings that have not been delivered last year, and also those savings that were delivered on a one-off basis, there was a further £20.7 million to be identified to be managed in this financial year. So table 5A and 5B break down the overall delivery in terms of those that savings delivery, which is sitting at 53% on average at 25% of the year progressed. I'll finish there, Chair, but say hand over to Willem and have to take any questions as necessary. Thank you.
Okay, Willem, have you got anything you wish to add?
Just a few pointers, if I may, Chair. I think it's important to remember this is a historical report finishing the end of June. It also is against, we must remember that this council spends £700 million a year. So we need to put it into context. I was pleased to, once we were in receipt of the draft report, as promised, I shared it with leaders of the opposition early as I could in August. And I think we gave it a good hearing at that meeting. And I don't want it, finally, just to say that we have given the senior management team, we've got to get our act together with getting these savings delivered and the spending down. So, this gives us a good front runner from the end of June to understand where this organisation is, and hopefully will give us the time to pull it all back in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask if anybody got questions, and then I shall probably get Ben J to answer most of the questions. So I've got Roger, Rob, and then Rosemary and Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a number of different questions on the different areas, but if I can pick up the amended report which you referred to, or corrected report you referred to, which was issued last Thursday, and the original one. The corrected report just shows period 3. The one that was withdrawn shows a bit of period 4, which is July. It was referred to earlier on this meeting that there will be more details shown in it. How can we scrutinise anything if we do not have up-to-date information? I would ask the appropriate officers, is the report finalised? If the report is finalised, and by this withdrawn paper it looks like it was, why isn't it before scrutiny? Because scrutiny is entitled under the Constitution to see any report which is in a finalised condition and not still in preparation. Period for July is an important period. We're now in September. By the look of it, we won't receive this until November. The council is in such a situation. If we're going to scrutinise anything, we need the information as soon as it's available, as soon as possible. So why have we not got period 4? I see it's on today's agenda, but I haven't seen any papers for it. Is it a late paper? I do not know. I am disappointed, very disappointed, that we are not seeing it today so that we can judge and scrutinise where this council is and where it's likely to be next March.
Right, I'm going to get James to answer that question.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Firstly, just to be absolutely clear, period 4 report has not been produced. The information that was shown, I can put it simply, there is a big spreadsheet that runs from period 1 through to period 12. The fact that that exists does not mean that period 12, for example, was in any way complete. What happened was, as the piece was cut out to put into this report, a bit of the table ready for when we get to period 4 was included, which we felt would probably confuse people. And so therefore we reissued the report without that single column. And I don't even know what the figures are that are in it because they're not real figures. So there is no period 4. As I mentioned, I need to mention now, Chief Executive has been on leave for the last 2 weeks. So the period 4 report has yet to be produced and signed off by the senior team. So there is no report that can be produced and provided. I am fully prepared to give a verbal update based on the information that we have at the moment later on the agenda in that item, as it is the latest information that is available to this council, including to me, is period 3, and therefore we need to scrutinise the latest information that we have, which is in the report in front of you.
Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. To progress this, it is a long time saying that this council is run by members, not run by officers. So we only see some things that officers say we can see. We don't see information when it's available. This council, this information shows at the end of period 1, the end of June, £313,000 was the predicted amount that was in general reserves. 2 months later, this council does not know its present position. That's what I'm hearing now. 2 months, a sixth of the year, and we do not know how the finances are stacking up, what is happening. Why? This is a scrutiny report looking at this, the main item on today's meeting, and we have not got the information of where the council is at this moment in time.
Okay, Roger, I do have Gwynam on screen, but I would just like to say that whilst the administration operate a strong leader model, we have to delegate the operational function to the officers. And we cannot and should not interfere with operational items. I'm going to stop there and pass over to Gwynam. Gwynam, have you got anything you'd like to say?
All I'd just like to refute what Councillor Evans is actually saying. If we think about it logically, the end of period 4 was approximately, the last working day of period 4 was approximately 5 weeks ago. And in those 5 weeks, it was the major holiday period of this organisation. And to actually say, you know, we're not working hard enough and not showing him anything, I actually took time out of my holidays to actually get that report to you, Roger, as soon as I got it. And I will do the best I can with the period reports as well. But, you know, a bit of support would be a change rather than constantly having a go, because we are trying our best here. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in fairness, Roger, over the last 12 months, the reports have been coming through an awful lot quicker, as James will attest to. I mean, the officers have been working extremely hard to get us the information, but it's really, really important that we look at the right information And this clearly isn't the right information because it was a mistake. Okay, Roger, have you got anything else?
Yeah,
before
I have, but I'll let somebody else come in. My last comment on this item is that I note in the report before us today, spending is now to be discussed weekly by the executive team from September. Does that mean we've not been looking at the spending since weekly or whatever? I don't know. What monthly reports go into the executive team? £313,000 is very, very near saying that this council is going into negative territory, which we are not allowed legally to do. So that is my concern. We seem to be drifting. And the cabinet and the cabinet members have portfolios. And in the report today, there is a report, maybe Appendix 7, I think, or something like that, which shows the portfolio holders and their areas of finance, and every one of them is overspent. Every one of them is overspent. One of them by £14 million. And what are we doing at this council?
Thank you, Roger. So, Rob, you have a question.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to ask a few questions relating to the risk table on what's 4.2 on page 3. It says the organisational savings are subject to support from the council's partner, with further deeper initiatives proposed to mitigate the shortfalls. Could officers go into sort of what they're thinking about with those proposed initiatives? Also, just below that, it says sort of some areas of savings proposed by the service leads have not been wholly achieved. Could officers go into why those things haven't been achieved and what actions officers are going to take to bring that back into alignment?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Ben J to answer that question. You happy to answer that, Ben?
Always happy to answer a question, of course. I think just in terms of the service-led savings and the why, there's a number of different reasons for those. You will appreciate, I'm sure, within the committee that some savings are very simple to deliver. It's just a change to a low-value contract and we can deliver it and it's done. Other contracts are bigger, more complex, or other service changes take a bit more time to put in place than has been anticipated. So some of the under-delivery is to do with essentially things taking rather longer than had previously been planned or being more complex than had previously been identified. That, of course, and given Councillor Evans' comments just now, that on its own is not a sufficient explanation for what's going on. So your other question, Councillor Gittins, was around what are officers doing on that. James may want to pick up a bit more detail around this, but there is now a cross-cutting group of officers working right across all of the different service areas, specifically grouped to work on savings delivery. Thematic leads have been assigned against those, and the specific remit of that group is to support service areas to come forward either with deliverable savings plans against the originally intended savings, or to work out the appropriate mitigations which will help to measure that. So there are data streams, information available to those officers, and greater governance around that to get that visibility and to give that a real push to make sure that where there are service-led savings that have not yet been put into a position whereby they can be delivered in whole or in part by the end of the year, appropriate measures are put in place. So hopefully that will give some confidence to the committee that appropriate measures are being taken on the officer side to grip those issues and to make sure that we've got that kind of control. Does that answer the question? I think there was another part to the question as well, Councillor, and forgive me, I missed the first part. If you could just repeat it, I can pick that up as well.
Yeah, sorry, it was just about sort of what initiatives you were proposing to cut the shortfalls, basically.
For sure. I think that the second part of that question then, so there's the Savings Delivery Group, which is an officer group reporting into the executive management team, the chief officers. That group has been tasked with bringing forward the savings, as I've just outlined. There is a similar process now in place, which is relating to spending, supply chain spending, Those are the weekly meetings that are happening within the directorate leadership teams. They'll be able to scrutinise individual transactions going through, and then to take a view whether those individual transactions, which themselves represent wider groups of transactions, are absolutely necessary for spending towards the end of the year. The purpose there, and as Councillor Butler outlined earlier, the purpose there is to tackle the spending which is not yet committed between now and the end of the year. So just to give clarity on that for the committee, the council budgets to spend approximately £700 million through the course of the year. At this point in time, the council has actually spent slightly under £300 million. So simple arithmetic, £400 million has not yet been spent, and we can scrutinise that carefully to make sure we spend no more than we absolutely have to. It's not the case that officers have not been scrutinising that. I think there's been a degree of scrutiny around that, of course, as you would expect going through. We've been used to that over the last few years. We need to ramp that up and only spend the amounts that we genuinely need to. So there is time enough left in the year to take positive action. We've got 400 million that we can review, and there is now a clear mechanism in place that will help officers right across the council to make sure that we only spend the money that is necessary to deliver the services which we are obliged to deliver. So that's the approach that's being taken. I hope that answers the question, but happy to take any further questions, Jane.
You content, Rob? Okay, so I've got Rosemary next.
Thank you, Chair. So I recognise obviously the huge effort towards making the enormous scale of savings that are needed to strain on officers, everyone involved, fully recognise. But this report makes very grim reading. More or less, the position made clear in the peer review 2 years ago is where we are, and decisive progress does feel very slow from an opposition point of view. Remember, we're not involved in the administration, so we have only reports as they come out to give us the feel of what's happening. So there's a huge number of yet to be realised notes on the report throughout the report, and that they come in that word form of words and other ways. What does that mean? Are they almost complete? Are we expecting them this afternoon? Are they not started? Where are we? And I know you've covered that to some degree, Ben, but I'd really like to know. I'd like us to have a little bit more information on what the state of play is, because time is of the essence, isn't it? We all understand, I'm sure, the external pressures that exist on certain of our services, particularly in the People Directorate. But we're showing a 15 million overspend projected for the Place Directorate. In the middle scenario of projections, and a lack of confirmed savings in a large number of areas there, for example. And there are some small points that I wanted to ask about. Green waste management, that shows a 4 million short on savings due to implementation delays, which I don't really understand. I'm not sure where that implementation delay took place, because as far as I'm aware, this proceeded through council processes without any real delays. And it is also a system in terms of the green waste charging that has, I would imagine, certainly there's an upfront payment situation. So I would have thought that we should be, it's a front-loaded system. So where are we on that? Are people registering? I know it's only just gone live, but is it actually happening? The pyrolysis plants, equally, that went straight through council. Why delayed? And is it now on target? And I see that on P5, on page 5 that you covered earlier, there are no potential project risks, but there are potential project risks. The Northwest Relief Road is a huge project risk, but there is no mention of it in the report. So overall, that extremely worrying difference between the favourable, the likely, in the middle situation, the adverse projections, it's just extremely worrying. And all those points that I've asked for, particularly yet to be delivered, I think are the things that will give reassurance to members.
Okay, very good questions, Rosemary. So, yes, what I was going to say was, I think James ought to answer the question about the waste and the pyrolysis plant. and then Ben can answer the rest. Is that right?
That's fine, Chair. I'll,
Yeah.
I'll pick up just a little bit on
A little
on
bit,
all of them,
and then
then,
I'll pass it
and then I
to
can
Ben.
pass on to Ben. But so just for my sanity, if I go through in order, that does make it. That's okay, Chair. Okay, so the first bit I just wanted to pick up in relation to what the TV confirmed and stuff. What does that mean? That is exactly the point. So it's just trying to pull those things together. I said within one of the tables, there's a £5.5 million adjustment that will be allocated into each of those areas. So what we've got, that was about the resizing. So the resizing work was a piece of work that was done with direct support from PwC, where we went through and did a service review of every single service area. We looked at the voluntary redundancies, the vacancies. We looked at opportunities for each part of the organisation, and challenged ourselves in detail with whether we could make adjustments to that area. That was a piece of work that we worked through, and we came to an overall figure, which has come to about 5.5 million in year impact of that. However, we then had to take that work through and look at each individual service area, each individual team, and each individual person within that, and go through an HR process. Until we've gone through that, we won't be able to allocate that 5.5 million, which may turn out to be a different figure, maybe higher or lower, as we work through that detail, allocate those out into the individual areas. So individual areas will say there are organisational savings here to be confirmed. That is what it is, because we've not shown it in the service area, we're just taking a global figure over here. Those things will become one going forward. On top of that, and Ben talked about this earlier, there is a review of third-party spend. There's two parts to that. One is a review of contracts and contract management. So are there things that we can do between now and the end of the year, which says, actually, we're going to do things a different way, or we're not going to commission quite the amount that we did before, we'll do things in a revised way. Or alternatively, is there within our existing arrangements, that may be a contract, that may be something else, around essential and non-essential spend. So is there non-essential spend that we could stop, or we could reduce, or we could delay between now and the end of the year? So both of those initiatives fit into that to be confirmed element. So while I absolutely take the point from Councillor Evans, and I totally agree with him in relation to 313,000 in annual balance is simply not enough. Absolutely. There are initiatives that we can't yet quantify, which will reduce the overspend and will increase that general fund balance position. What I can't do as yet, and I won't be able to do for period 4 either, is to say what that looks like in its entirety. In terms of the people and place overspends, the people overspend is fundamentally due to pressure within demand. The place overspend is fundamentally due to non-delivery of savings. So keeping things quite simple, the focus within the place directorate is how do we manage those non-delivery of savings. The important thing is we get those savings delivered at some point, even if we can't, we're projecting we can't deliver them quite yet. So that's, again, Ben mentioned it, there's now a savings delivery group that's been set up, which I chair, which enables me to ensure we have a very tight grip on those savings delivery. So that will improve, and that's starting from the 1st of September. So we will start to see the impact of that in period 6, period 7, period 8, as we work through that. In terms of the green waste and the charging and the delays in implementation, there were a number of elements to this. One is around the revision of the PFI contract, and questions about whether we can adjust that. That is subject to confidential conversations with the contractor in relation to that. And so there was an assumption, a hope, an expectation that those discussions would happen earlier, and we would have an answer sooner than we have. But we haven't got that answer yet. Therefore, that saving's been delayed. In terms of the charging for garden waste, absolutely, that is we've got had a lot of calls and people on the website around that. So we know people are signing up for that. You're absolutely right. It is an upfront payment. However, it's an upfront payment from 1st of October through to the 30th of September. So we can only account for 6 months of that income in this financial year. So there was a target of just over £4 million. Assuming we achieve that £4 million exactly, then we would account for £2 million of it this year and £2 million next year. And then from next October, the next £4 million would account for 2 million, 2 million each in the financial years. So because it's being started halfway through the year, that means we lose that in relation to that. I'll jump over pyrolysis because I don't have any update on that, but Ben may have. So I'll just give him warning when it goes over to him that he might be able to pick that up. In terms of the project risk, there are, again, we talked about this at the last scrutiny meeting, there are 4 or 5 significant projects, all of which are relate to potential risk. The North West Relief Road is absolutely one of those. In relation to the current financial year, we are not identifying any risk of any of those failing such that there would be a revenue implication within this financial year. So even if there was a failure of any of those particular projects in year, then there would be a period of time before, as we worked our way through that, what those implications would be. So at the moment, we're not anticipating, we're not anticipating a project failure, and if there was a project failure, we're not anticipating that falling in revenue in this financial year. That's why those are shown as 0. Nevertheless, you're absolutely correct, there are project risks associated with those, but they will be further down the line. Stop there and then over to Ben.
You got.
May I just come back?
Yeah, come back. Yeah.
Yeah, just to say that I just want to make a note there that the PFI contract is very difficult to negotiate at this stage partway through. And that's something that will be referred to later on as we go through the meeting. And there was one small thing that I'm sorry I missed my question. 16.2 in the report says this. In paying suppliers, the council has adopted a no purchase order, no pay process, which ensures the transactions are only processed with a valid authorised purchase order, thereby ensuring prompt payments to suppliers on receipt of invoice. That's day 1 of an accountant's course, isn't it? Accountancy course or bookkeeping course. I don't understand why that's in the report. Surely we've always had that.
Okay, so sorry, just to focus on me. No purchase, no pay was built into the ERP system when we brought it in. However, it was not the system that was adopted in this authority prior to that. So it's only with ERP that's been brought in. There are a number of areas where that cannot work, and there are a number of areas where we are now focusing on where it can work, but that has not been adopted. And part of the process going forward will be where we have a purchase order in place, there is the opportunity then to review that spend before the payment is made. Retrospectively, ordering goods, receiving those goods, raising an invoice coming in, and then raising a purchase order in reverse has happened across the authority. We cannot allow that to happen any further to enable us to bring in this extra control. So there's 2 parts to it. One is just getting our house in order in terms of that control, and the second bit is then enforcing that control. So it's 2 parts to that, and that's why it's just reported within the report to make it clear that that's what officers would have to do.
Okay, so Ben, would you like to answer the question on pyrolysis?
I would love to do my best to answer that. My simple understanding at the current time of that is that the decision that was taken, I think, some 6-8 months ago, there is an issue with the group structure around delivery, and that there is the process going through. I think it's around an arm's length delivery organisation, about how I think that was already set out in the original report, but the delay relates to the setting up and the confirmation of that arm's length delivery vehicle.
Okay, thank you. Are you content, Rosemary?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what I've got Tony, Julian, Heather, and then Jeff.
And me, Chairman.
And then Roger. Because you've got to come back. Okay. Tony, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to pick up one question and one comment really with regards to the executive summary, the very early part of this report. And the first is to do with the forecast as at the 30th of June, and the central figure that we have seen before, and we know, and we've got the background to how we believe we will end up in that position by the end of the year of 38.5 million. I just wondered what it is that tips that to the adverse position of 73.75 million, because that's an additional 35.25 million pounds. And I just wondered, what is it that switches us from central to adverse? That's my question. The second point is in 2.4. I mean, I wish I was as confident as to be able to say that, you know, we're unlikely to be out of balance by the end of the budget. I mean, we're talking about 38.5 as being the likely spend over budget, with a general fund balance of 38.8. We've got 300k spare on top of that. So, I mean, it's incredibly tight, and there is, you know, the potential to slip, if not to 73.75 million, but somewhere closer to that point. So it's really those two issues that I wanted to raise.
Okay, I think there is actually an appendix that shows all that, but I'll get James to explain it all. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm happy to chair. Again, Ben may want to come in. Ben may want to come in on some of this. Just to reiterate the point, taking this in reverse order, to reiterate the point, £300,000 is absolutely not acceptable in terms of that overall position. The point that's being made is that based on our current projections, with 3/4 of the year to go, based on the information that's currently within the system, that's where we would be. So you're absolutely right. That position could get worse or it could get better. The fundamental thinking behind that is what we have said is where we have been able to identify a saving, where we have a projection around expenditure or income, we've built those in. So therefore, by definition, there are savings proposals that we have not yet got a projection on because they're showing at the moment that they're not going to be delivered. Well, actually, if we delivered that, you know, a few days before the end of the year, that'll be a benefit this year. So there's still time to turn those around, and it's turning those around that will improve the situation. The risks associated with an adverse position are that more around that there are unknowns, there are things that will come upon us. That's why you hold the general balance, because of those things that could come forward over the year that we're not aware of. That's why we need to bring it down. In terms of where that £74 million figure comes from, so within table 3, which is on page 5 of the pack, we have the 3 scenarios: favourable, central and adverse. And each of those is broken down to those 7 areas I alluded to before. Within the adverse scenario, there is then a figure associated with each of those 7 areas. So the savings delivery figure, for example, which we're currently assessing to be around about £32 million shortfall, grows to the figure shown in there. In terms of the social demand care, again, we've got a figure of £6.3 million, which is the current projection. Under the adverse, again, there's a figure shown there, which is, for example, like double that figure. And then there is an assumption around capital receipts sufficiency in section 4, which at the moment we're assuming will be sufficient. But the figure of around about £20 million shown as an adverse delivery in relation to capital receipts, and therefore that falling on revenue is where that comes from. So there are several figures throughout which show where that £74 million is. The top figure, which is around the savings delivery, that's suggesting that there would be elements of the current assurance that's being provided by everybody from a service manager through to an executive director around savings delivery actually turns out to be that doesn't actually occur, and so we're trying to demonstrate that could happen because even with those savings, some savings that are in the bank delivered done. You know, a contract has been amended, the savings have been made. There are other savings and a lot within People Directorate, which are going to need delivery over the year. So while at the moment the projection is they will be delivered, if you take your foot off the gas just for a minute, that could slip. So that's what the adverse scenario is trying to demonstrate. Again, I'll hand over to Ben.
Have you got anything you wish to add
to that?
No, I was also going to point to that table 3. That's the purpose of that, is to try to explain the movement between the two. And James has just taken the committee through that, so I won't take anything else at this point. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got Julian next.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Really helpful, James, that you sort of said, you explained that the pressures in people are to do with demand, and the pressures in place are to do with non-delivery of identified savings plans. So just a couple of questions about both of those. So I think the experience we had last year was that the pressures in people were around, you know, a ballooning demand from people who are struggling in our communities, that it was difficult to predict. And so are we still in a situation where there is difficult to predict demands? Are there things coming down the stream which could increase those demands? I mean, I don't know, the changes to winter fuel payments, for example. So I think other things on the way which could actually make that situation worse. And also, my understanding is that the primary way to deal with those pressures is about investing save, rather than just cutting the service, because we can't, because we're at statutory levels. It's about investing to do it differently. So just be interested in it, you know, whether that's correct. In terms of place directorate, in terms of non-delivery of savings, is that because the projected savings plans, if you like, were not realistic, or is it just because they're very difficult to deliver? So I think it's just, you know, because there's clearly different types of issues in those two departments, and I think it'd be helpful to understand the types of issues we're dealing with. Because if in place, it's about, you know, and this is going to sound, I don't want this to sound, it's going to sound rude, but I'll say it anyway. But I don't mean it to be rude. But you know, if we are in a situation where there was a whole load of savings plans, but actually turns out they weren't realistic, is that where we are, or is it, yeah? I'll leave it there.
Okay, James.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so yeah, it is helpful to think about it in that way in terms of people in place, because that's what the information is showing us. So it allows us to kind of talk about it at a fairly high level. The danger is then dropping in from that high level into the detail, because that's when it starts to that's when it starts to get more complicated and kind of go down different routes. So in terms of the people side, so if we remember last year, what we had was a situation where there was significant growth in relation to demand, which had not been reflected adequately within the budget, and that became clear. So what we were planning to do was to make sure there was sufficient growth built in this year so that we wouldn't have that pressure. What we saw last year in terms of the savings delivery from the People Directorate, actually that was pretty much nailed on. They delivered the majority of their savings in a very difficult climate. So this year we're still working on the basis, using that assurance from last year, that those savings will be delivered. Now there is a link between the savings delivery and the actual demand within that, because as you say, there are things that you need to invest in which maybe take a little bit longer to actually drive out those reductions in demand. So the work that's being done at this moment is around twofold. One is, as we do every year, we're getting a really, really tight grip this year on the levels of demand within the service and what projections are for next year. So we have an assumption as to what that means for next year. We have around about £15 million worth of demand growth built into the budget for 25-26. So the first question that we look at now is the demand figures that have been built into the current year sufficient in terms of the budget, and will they be sufficient for next year? And the question is, are the initiatives that are being undertaken impacting sufficiently on that to demonstrate that that's happening? The second piece of work, which is far more complicated and intricate and will take a little bit longer to deliver, is in terms of that modelling, where are the initiatives, where are those schemes, those investor save or whatever they may be, that effectively say, if we put more into this and less into that, does that actually give us a better position from a financial point of view? In the majority of cases, actually gives a better outcome for the individual, so it's a kind of a win-win. But we need, you know, at the moment, my focus clearly is on that financial position. So, where are those levers that we can pull, which will address that figure? So those things are being worked through at the moment. That will mean that we'll have a better idea of where we are in terms of this year, in terms of demand, and in a sense, more importantly, where that demand figure goes next year, because that £15 million worth of growth could potentially be higher or lower. And clearly, if it's lower, that's a significant benefit to the organisation. So that review, I keep looking to the screen because Rachel Robinson is working directly with Tanya Miles, the two executive directors, looking at that demand model, and they're working on it as we kind of speak. So that will be a really helpful piece of work in relation to understanding that. So I can't give you an answer in terms of what that means. What I can tell you is that's the process that we're working through, and I'm encouraged that we're on top of the savings delivery within that area, and we're going to have a tighter handle on the demand element, because once we understand what that is, we can then move that into a higher savings delivery, because at least we understand those initiatives. From a place point of view, it's a balanced picture that we just need to make sure we're painting here. There are significant initiatives that have been taken forward within the Place Directorate, savings that need to be made, programmes of work that need to be undertaken, restructures, etc., all of which are happening and are delivering significant reductions in the spending. So it's not to say that Place aren't delivering their savings. There are some significant savings that have not been delivered, and that's what's impacting on their position. There are lots of savings that we have delivered. In terms of those that have not, they are some big numbers. So they relate to the waste, which we talked about. So we know that the garden waste charging is only 50%. There's nothing we can do about that. And we know that the negotiations are happening in relation to the waste PFI and around the energy use. So all of that will work its way through in terms of those figures. There are then some big numbers in relation to things like estates rationalisation. So there's about £3 million taken out in terms of the cost of buildings within the authority. That is a balancing act between what does the organisation need, what do communities need, and what we financially afford. That at the moment, so far, has taken a view which has not led to those savings being taken out. And you can draw your conclusions as to kind of which of those three parts that focus is on, and where that focus needs to move. So in other words, to deliver that saving within estates, we will need to make some very firm decisions in relation to what that estate looks like going forward, and that will have impacts in terms of what buildings are open in individual areas around the county, and from which services are working from. That will mean some disruption, some movements, but if we're going to drive those savings out, that's what it will mean. So it's those sorts of things. So has there been a delay? Yes. Is that because of a poor project plan? Not necessarily, but it's certainly been in terms of the implementation of that project plan. That's where the delay has been, and it's now a change in focus because we need to survive financially this year, and that's where that focus starts to shift.
Yeah, Julian.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Rather than me trying to draw my own conclusions, could you just help me a little bit to do that? Are we talking about Shirehall to Frankwell? Is it that project? Is that the sort of thing we're talking about?
So, if I may share, the shift from Shirehall is certainly one of those. That is a significant saving in the order of £1.5 million. Part of that is in this year. The majority of that is in next year. So the movement needs to happen this year to enable that saving to be taken. But that's partly it. But then there are other. We have £22 million worth of revenue costs associated with the assets that we're. So the premises costs of running the assets we have in this authority is around about £22 million. What we've said is we're going to take about a quarter of that out. So we're taking about £6 million out over the next 2 years. That's what we've proposed. That's what we've built into the MTFS. That is outside of the Shirehall, which is a cost on top of it.
Okay. Thank you. Heather.
Some of what I was going to say has been answered as you go along. But there's some interesting other points that actually I'd quite like to raise. When we're talking about changing the way we deliver services, and there's quite a lot in here about third parties and pressures on contracts and so on, and I can pick out all the individual bits where it says those things, but I won't bore you because you wrote the paper. There will be some significant ways that we're beginning to deliver services, as you've just explained, which are a huge benefit and actually mean they're much more efficient. There will be other areas where we're losing services. The public still do not understand that actually the council is significantly cash strapped. It would be really useful both for this committee, the council as a whole, and for the public to understand that actually we're doing things differently and give them some examples where actually things are better. But it would also be useful if they knew what things they were no longer entitled to, that they will no longer have delivered. And the numbers and the words tell us that that's happening, but you don't know what. So I think there's some significant learning that we could do around all of that, but actually it's quite important in realistic terms for everybody to understand exactly what this budget squeeze is causing, both for the residents and for those of us who are elected. So is there a plan to do that? And it's not possible for each scrutiny committee to look at those individual areas in the time that they have available to them with the programmes as crushed as they are. Now, if I come to people, for instance, the no-brainer, but the very difficult bit, as we all know, is when we come to deliver services with the ICB or the NHS, where actually there are some significant areas where we could make savings because we share things rather than we doing things independently. So I'd be really interested to know, because nobody has mentioned that at the present time, where that might figure in savings for the future or improved services for the future, because I do think that there's a significant area of improving services within the People Directorate and across the ICB. That's my first question. Just referring to the waste thing, remarkably, I did that last night and I had to look at it 3 times before I went into it because it takes you straight through to my permit and I thought I was trying to pay for parking. I think somebody needs to change that on the website. Anyway, if you want more people to actually sign up without a lot of stress, that's an aside. I think there is another big pressure coming forward that nobody has also mentioned, which is that it looks as though the living wage or the minimum wage or whatever you like to refer to it as, the LGA were talking last week that actually that may be a significant raise this coming year. That will put huge pressures on our budgets, because if that means that it's above the 2.5% that we have budgeted for, and the differentials involved in all of that, then our budget could be shot out of the water. And what are we putting in place to begin to mitigate exactly that? Because it is a scary prospect for the future. And I think Julian was at the LGA as well, and I don't know whether you picked that up at anything. So there was something else I was going to raise, and I've forgotten what it was because I haven't written it down. Don't worry about that. I'll come back if I remember.
Can I just say before James answers? I mean, your point about basically about communications. I mean, actually, the council invested a lot of time and money in the Shropshire plan, and there was a lot of work around that. And I think we have been putting the comms out, but to try and explain to people, because every year there's always a financial shortfall. So every year the papers report on a financial shortfall. And I think it's very difficult for people to understand just how bad the situation is.
I don't dispute that, Claire. It's just that we have to keep doing it, and you have to give
Yeah, yeah.
examples. While it's high level and while it's nebulous, people don't take it in.
Yeah.
It's when it's real and they have examples, and that's what we're not communicating well.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. James, would you like to answer the rest?
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree with the sentiment. Certainly, we need to be improving and getting more communications and information out there in terms of the financial situation. That's not to say that we haven't been doing that. There's lots and lots of messages that have been going out. Whether they've been landing or not, I can't comment on that. But certainly, I'm constantly signing off releases and information, whatever, that talks about the unprecedented financial position that we're in as an authority. I think you're absolutely right. It's not an argumentative point. I think you're absolutely right in relation to, I don't think that people are seeing the examples of what that really means, because that's the point that it comes down to. So you can tell people it's going to be difficult, but then when we then say that as a result of that, therefore we're going to have to charge for garden waste, we get a petition coming in from people saying we don't want to pay that. Well, that's completely understandable, but actually, given our financial position, the way we're charging for free waste is also completely understandable. The point is, it's trying to get those two things together. So, in terms of the work that's being done around the resizing, there will be an implication in relation to the overall efficiency of the council and what we can deliver. So there will be reductions in performance. I'm absolutely sure about that because we have taken vacant posts out. We've allowed voluntary redundancy to happen where that is physically possible. It's not the ideal situation to take those positions to take those from, and it never will be in those sorts of situations. It's fortuitous in terms of where those fall, or unfortuitous depending on which way you look at it, and therefore there will be implications for that. The part, though, that builds into is the work that's now being undertaken. So we had to do that first because we had to address the financial situation from an employee point of view. That in itself was partly in mitigation, preparation, preempting the fact that there could be things like additional pay awards, not necessarily this year, but certainly into the future. So therefore, if we've resized the organisation early, you take out those vacant posts, you take out those VRs, that does have a material implication in terms of the multiplication for the inflation calculation. So do you want to come in?
I think certainly for elected members,
yeah,
it's really important we understand what those are. And actually, you get a paper in front of you, it doesn't tell you, because its numbers is not actually what it's delivering. And you talk in the papers about WSP and their role in how the third parties always worry me. Mm-hmm. What happens to those? Because many of those will be the voluntary sector. And those are the ones who are very local in their delivery. So lots of information about what's happening there is really important, especially if it happened to be CAB, with what's going on at the moment. And you mentioned it when you were speaking about the looking at what happens if you do this here and the impacts on that there. That is welcome, but actually, I'm not sure we're that good at doing that still. And what you haven't mentioned when you're talking about place, and this is the thing I forgot, is where we're going with Kia.
I think that's probably for another day.
No, it's not. It's part of actually delivering services slightly differently. It's actually about a better use of our funding. It's about a better delivery on the ground. There's a whole range of things that you can do around that still. And it's a contract that maybe needs to be looked at yet again.
I've got Gwynn. Can I get Gwynn in first, and then James?
A couple of points, just to reassure Heather. Myself and Rachel Robinson meet monthly, if not more often, with a task and finish group from the voluntary community sector, which includes Jackie Jeffries, Citizens Advice Shropshire, Nicola from the Mayfair Centre at Church Stretton, and a couple of others, and we keep them up to date with all the cabinet papers and what is actually changing, and they are fully aware of the redundancies. But I do get your point. We need to understand if the quality of the delivery is going to change to affect our residents, and that's something we perhaps need to work on across the board. Furthermore, I think later on this agenda, we have the opportunity to talk about alternative budgets and collaborative budgets. And I think if we are agreeable to that, that would be the ideal time, Heather, for us to have that task and finish group to actually look at things like the Kia contract, like all these other questions you're coming up. And I would welcome those conversations where we can have a short, snappy task and finish group to actually do that in collaboration, and that everybody is transparent and everybody has all the information. Thank you.
Okay, and the good thing about the task and finish groups is they're actually private meetings, so they're not public, so people will be able to glean a lot more information. I'm going to leave it there unless you desperately want James to come back on anything, Heather.
Just the ICB and working, because actually it's a fundamental part of our delivery in people.
Yeah, okay.
Does Ben want to come in on that?
Ben, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I'm just very quickly around it. It's a big area of activity. I think it's probably worth the committee being aware of two things. The first is that many of my colleagues in the authority meet with their counterparts in the ICB, ICS, and Laura Tyler is a kind of a joint post, so she works very much across both areas. It's not perfect on either side of the fence. We've got the kind of challenges that are set out in the paper that this committee is considering. The ICS has got similar challenges, and they're being scrutinised very heavily by NHS England at the moment. However, I think it's important to bear in mind both that the work on the ICS side is continuing to move on, and we're trying to work alongside each other in such a way that we don't cause problems for them and they don't cause problems for us. That's where we collaborate, and that's where we try to get the best value out of what you can term the Shropshire pound. So the money they receive, the money we receive, how do we get best value out of that? It's worth noting as well that some of the work in adults around I think it's the START arrangements, have helped significantly, particularly seen through last winter, to work with the hospital and local NHS around how hospital discharges worked, and that was part of the reason that last winter was less of a pressure on both sides. So there's a good example there, joint working. I think it's also worth noting that while in some areas, some of the feedback from a regulator like Ofsted has been to some extent critical sometimes of the level of NHS engagement around things like children's safeguarding. The recent engagement with Ofsted that the council has had has not flagged that in quite the same way. So I think it's an absolutely important question to ask. The answer I would give at this point is that there is ongoing discussion with them. We're doing quite well to make sure that we get the funding where we should get the funding, but that we're also working in partnership where we need to be working in partnership. It's a productive and positive arrangement at the moment. It's getting somewhere, but neither of us is flush with cash right here, right now. So hopefully that provides the committee with a bit of an update and answer to the question.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Heather. I've got Jeff and then Roger.
Jeff Anderson. Obviously, when we're looking at the various scenarios, and I'm going back to the very start, you've got your favourable, central and adverse. And the central potential variant to budget is 38.5 million. And you've got a general fund balance of only 38.8. So even your central, which is the one that you're estimating heading for, is really totally unacceptable. And therefore, when you actually look at worse scenarios, and your 74 million scenario, it's getting immensely scary. And it's a question, and I shouldn't really be asking it, but behind the scenes, do we have thoughts of putting a team together that is totally ruthless, in that we have a ruthless cutting strategy? Because and thankfully it's only Q1, but if we start drifting into Q2 and Q3 and we're starting to look at 50 million, we've got to do something. And because what we can't afford to do, as everybody knows, is allow things to go out to our own hands. It's just unthinkable. And then the cuts will be even more savage. So is such a team in the background there thinking, look, if this starts to drift the wrong way, heading towards 50 million, do we have a team in the background that will really, really look ruthlessly at our cost base?
James.
I'm not going to disagree with anything you've said, and absolutely spot on the money in terms of that position being unacceptable, and in terms of there needing to be, I think ruthless is the correct word, in relation to overseeing and ensuring that our financial situation improves over the coming months. Is there a team in place? Yes. That team's now been set up. I alluded to earlier, Ben's alluded to it. We're calling it the Savings Delivery Group. Within that team, there will be there are 5 representatives. They come from different directorates, but they're actually not reviewing expenditure or income necessarily within their directorates. They're taking a view across the board. That enables them to be a little bit more dispassionate in relation to the implications of that. We also have PwC colleagues with that meeting as well, who can provide another level of independence and ruthlessness, continue to use that word, in relation to challenging and questioning. That group will also have the ability to oversee, so again, Ben mentioned the spending control meetings that are happening. So every pound of expenditure that will be going through the system can be and will be squirted out of that system to be reviewed by each leadership team. Now, there's a danger within each directorate leadership team that you're marking your own homework to some extent. So, of course, you can justify that expenditure. The question is not, can you justify expenditure? The question is, can we afford to make that spend? So if we're saying that needs to be cut by 5% or 10% or 20% or whatever it needs to be, and that's what we're working through, then the question is, so how do you get to that point? That will be managed within the directorates. However, as I say, the oversight will come from this delivery group. And within that, there are representatives from each of those directorates, but that review will be taken at a cross-directorate view. So you won't just be challenging your own, you won't be coming as a representative from your own area. You'll be asking, okay, so I'm here to review third-party spend. Some of that third-party spend is in people, in place, in resources. So therefore, what's the challenge? In terms of staffing, there is a resizing group. There are agency costs that are starting to be requested in a certain area. That's been signed off by the directorate. No, that's going to be reviewed here, so that there is that element of ruthlessness. The question is, have we set that at the right level, or does it need to ratchet up or ratchet down depending on where we go? We're going to have to feel our way through that for the first few weeks, but we are looking. You made the point. We don't want this taken out of our hands. So I'd rather we were harder, but Scrutiny needs to understand, members need to understand, the public need to understand there is a consequence of not spending that money to not only to the contractors, not only to the service users, but to the public more generally. There is a consequence, because it's going to have those implications, and that leads back to Heather's point. Do the public actually understand what those implications will be? That's what we have to work through, and that's why we've got communications as part of that group as well, so we can start to flag those and ask those questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Gwilym, and then I've got the last question, I think, is Roger. First and last. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, Gwilym.
Couple of points. Don't just think it's coming from the officers' side dealing internally with the spend. Each portfolio holder in cabinet is on their case with their teams to ensure that they actually within their portfolios drive down to their required targets, however hard that may be. Secondly, I think there's a lot of what we don't know at the moment as well. And taking Heather's point about the pay award, obviously we've only got 2.5% in there. If it is any higher than that, how is government going to let us fund it? Will it be taking away the single person council tax benefit, which will have a huge impact in Shropshire, probably a bigger impact than the cold weather payment? Will it be taking the cap off council tax? these are all things that we don't know at the moment, and it's things that we need to play out during the next few months. So it's going to be a very interesting time. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Gordon. Right, Roger. And then we're going to wrap it up then.
Thank you, Chairman. I could spend all morning answering questions about the report, and I think really the desperate state the council is, we should be asking for much more detail that's in the report. Commenting on the last comment that the Gwilym said, I do note that the £56 bin charge will go to those residents who do not pay council tax because of their low income, and they suddenly have to find £56 by the end of September to keep their green bin. No opportunity to phase it in, just very small notice. So those residents who really live from hand to mouth, and there are quite a few in Shropshire, and they're complaining quite rightly about the fuel charge, have suddenly got a £56 charge imposed on them. However, to talk more about what's in this report, there's a lot of words been spoken, but I'm interested in what is in this report. And I've got to say, the failures to make the savings. If one looks at Appendix A, for example, you've got commercial services, £3 million overspent. Green waste, £2.25 million overspent. Organisational, £1.95 million overspent. Waste PFI contract, £1.5 million overspent. Highways and transport, £7.8 million overspent. Economy and place, £1.5 million extra. All those over and above what they agreed and put to the council in February would be included in the budget. And talking about the cabinet members, if one goes to Appendix C, projected revenue outturned by portfolio holders, I see Gwilym's portfolio, finance, corporate resources and communities, forecast variance at present, £11.4 million. If one looks at portfolio holder for highways, some savings have been made, which would help pay for the extra costs that this council is incurring, having to pay, needing to pay for the social welfare. 4.2. There's some savings have been made. And then you go up to portfolio holders for the others. Every one of those portfolio holders are overspent. What are they doing about holding the area they are responsible to the council for, to ensure that they come down and they meet wherever possible what they agreed? And they came to the council meeting in February and said, these are the savings that we make, and this will deliver the budget that this council does. And the council, by a majority, accepted it and took it forward. I could go down further and go and drill down some more, not individual ones, but go down and pick up others that we could see in these papers where there's been, and I've got to use the word failure at present, for the cabinet member, and they are our representative, failed to deliver the savings that was there and are listed in all the appendices which are here. So I'm disappointed in the report. The detail just isn't there. We've asked to scrutinise it. And I do wish to make some alterations to the Transformation and Improvement Scrutiny Committee proposals and the recommendations that are there.
Okay, so I'm going to be making a recommendation in a minute. I do want to say a few things though. Looking through the paperwork, our third party spend is 431 million out of £700 million budget. That is extraordinary. I think the other thing is as well, and I think you're being a bit unfair on the cabinet holders there, Roger. As I say before, we make the policies and the officers are meant to implement them. And I am disappointed that the Chief Executive isn't here today. But my recommendation to the Cabinet would be that we direct the Chief Executive, and this is where I'm going to be a bit previous, because item number 11, we're actually going to set up a task and finish group, which I hope most people have agreed with, that we direct the Chief Executive to come to the next or the first transformation task and finish group with a plan to reduce third-party spending by 10% and to give us a plan to deliver the savings in place. So basically what I've done is I've done what Cabinet I think are going to do and place it in the Chief Executive's lap because he is the CEO and he is ultimately responsible. And I feel that we have done everything we can do and this now has to sit on his lap if he's back by Wednesday.
Can we actually add explicit that we have an explicit list of services that are discontinued and changed?
Well, I think that should be part of the plan. Yes.
It needs to be explicit.
Yeah. So is everyone happy with that, or does Roger want something else?
Thank you, Chairman. Move an amendment. Yeah, happy with that. But I look here on page 2 where it is, and I think I would want to add to that to say that we're disappointed at the lack of information concerning risks facing this council, and are concerned that the arrangements are only now being put in place to secure tighter control over all aspects of spending. Some of those words appear in this, and it's just adding to it. So I think we are disappointed about what is there, and I support what you say, but add these to it so that the full feelings of the scrutiny committee can be taken forward.
I'm not minded to accept that, Roger. We can have a vote there if you like. Have you got a seconder? David Basma. All those in favour? 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? 6. Right.
Can I submit that as a minority report then?
No.
Which I can do, as it's a report going now. Now, a minority report is possible. It's been stopped before because there was no report going. But under the Constitution, the scrutiny committees can put a minority report, in other words, not supported by the majority, but it's the view of the minority.
Well, I don't believe you can, but we can get the legal. Tim, would you have a comment on that?
So
we've never had a minority report.
It's not really a minority report, is it, Roger? It's just a note in the minutes to say you put forward an amendment and it was voted down. A minority report is a separate report that looked into a matter in detail and then reports back to Cabinet. All we're doing here is noting the fact that you wanted to revise the recommendations.
Through you, Chairman, we're not noting the report because it has been rejected, so it will not go anywhere. I want a minority report to be noted that is the feeling of maybe 5 members at least of this committee.
So it goes to the minutes. So it goes
yeah.
to the minutes.
So okay, I'm going to stop that there. Okay, so I've sought legal advice. The legal advice is it'll go in the minutes. So that's it. Rosemary, you wanted to say something.
No, I just wanted to say that as an opposition member, and the Labour group generally has questioned and queried and worried about the council's dependence on third-party contracts, and we mentioned earlier the PFA contract with regard to waste and how that is problematic at this point in terms of implementing green waste and what that will cost us in what is a drive to save money. So, of course, we support the wish to your suggestion that we would wish to reduce our dependence on those contracts by 10%, but there's no detail in that, Claire. It's very difficult to, the idea and the interest behind it. Yes, we would support that, but what is the outcome of it? Is there room for flexibility in the contracts? There should be, of course, but is there?
And so I think what I'm doing in that, Rosemary, is I'm asking for detail, but I'm asking for that detail to be discussed, not in the public domain. And I'm not saying 10% off each contract. I'm just saying 10% overall, so it doesn't have to come from each individual contract. But I think those conversations are ones best held with the chief executive in private. Yeah, you can tell me that. So I've made a recommendation. Have I got a seconder? Tom, all those in favour? Is it going to be unanimous?
Not quite.
No, not quite. Not quite. Okay. Thank you. Right. So we're going to move on now to item number 7, which is the performance monitoring report. Who's going to speak to this? Are you going to speak to it, or James?
I'm happy to give the
and then I'll let Robert speak. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So this is the first monitoring report of this year, Q1. So this is the information through to the end of June. This is based on the indicators that have been built up around the Shropshire plan. So the performance management framework has been set up in place now across the organisation. Significant work has been done over the last 18 months to 2 years to ensure that we've got a set of indicators that reflect the Shropshire plan in its entirety. There has been, again, a lot of work to ensure that the online reporting is in place. So the dashboard is now set up within a Power BI, and members have access to that and can look at that information in between scrutiny meetings and can raise issues and questions, concerns as part of that, and or in advance of this meeting itself, so that we are able to prepare responses to that. Nevertheless, what we've done within the covering report is identified those areas where there's been some notable changes or information provided, and that information is detailed in the pages of the report. Happy to take questions on any of those areas. Clearly, there was still work in relation to the module online in relation to ensuring that we have targets in place for all of the indicators and the baseline information which has been established against those to enable us to monitor those going forward. As I mentioned previously in the last item, I would expect it to be more difficult for the organisation to provide sustained improvement in a number of these indicators, and that's because of the financial priority for the council that we're having to manage. So I would expect there to be implications for some of those areas identified. I'm happy to take any questions rather than spending time on this through.
Yeah, okay. I'm going. Robert, would you like to say anything? I know Leon's got his hand up.
No, pretty much that's the main. Obviously, we're bringing in the report. A number of the indicators relate to the different portfolios, so those that are available and online can help answer those questions. Other than that, it's quite nice to get to a point where we've added, if you look at where we were sort of 12, 18 months ago in terms of indicators for members and so on, compared to where we are now and what's available live and to be updated, we are a lot further on. That's just through the hard work of the team working on those and working with service areas. So it's, I think we're somewhere near, but as we on go with the sort of digital transformation and the automation and things like that, again, these can be looked at, revised as we go along. So
yeah, and that's historically that's what we've done. But I agree,
yeah,
it's come on a long way.
Yeah,
it's improved a lot. Right. So I've got Julian, and then I've got Tony to ask questions.
Thank you very much. Firstly, it's on that this of adding targets. We've I think twice now voted that we wanted some targets on decarbonisation and around the climate action strategy. I'm not sure if we've got those yet, or how I would find out if we have got them. Perhaps I can have at least email going to the stakeholder group, the climate stakeholder group, which may or may not be meeting now that we've lost our head of department, but at least that group would be a good place to let us know they've appeared. The other one, and I don't know, this is sensitive, I suppose, so trigger warning, I guess, but 8.2 HP 15 about excess mortality rates, which are quite concerning, and quite a significant leap, it seems to me, around mortality rates around mental illness. I mean, is there anything specific, that a piece of work around that is useful? Are we talking about suicides, or what are we? You know, what's the trigger for that? What looks like a fairly significant leap.
Thank you, Julian. I don't know if anybody's got the answer to that question.
Again, you're getting into specifics.
We have got
my bit, I think, yeah.
we have got Laura on the call. Laura, are you there?
Hi, yes.
Hi, Laura. Do you have the question answer to Julian's question about mortality?
I don't know. It's newly reported as part of the public health framework, but I can certainly find out some more details for you.
Yeah. Okay. If you could email the answer to Tom, and Tom will distribute to the committee. Oh, and Tom's got something to say as well. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It was really just to confirm to the committee that mental health is a significant topic in the Health Overview Scrutiny Committee. There's a meeting tomorrow, so it's been done jointly with people Overview Scrutiny Committee, primarily looking at adult mental health. The plan at the moment, should the committee agree, is that it will have a general view following 2 briefings which took place earlier in the year at its next meeting on the 23rd of this month. And then it meets again in November, and depending on what the committee agrees, there's a good chance it will pick up specifically around this matter, Julian, on that matter. And Rachel obviously supports that committee very much.
No, I mean, the suicide rates were actually discussed in a sort of pre-meeting this morning so that we actually cover that when we cover this whole subject. But mental health has to be scrutinised has been a long time coming, and we're now doing it in a significant way.
Thank you for that. And I did mean to say, I just wanted to congratulate or to welcome the fact that there's quite a lot of report detail in some of those those target reports, especially from the people directorate. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is improving. It's easily improving greatly. Right, so I've got Tony and then Roger. Tony, you were next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to congratulate the council on the improvements that we see here in terms particularly of children's care. There have been some notable improvements, particularly the issuing of the educational healthcare plans. That was something that was certainly a problem previously, but there's been a marked improvement on that. And similarly with the assessment of children's needs in steps to ensure their safety and well-being. So there's been some positive progress there. I'm slightly disappointed that obviously there's been a change of the method of looking at certain numbers of these targets, so we don't have a view as to whether things are getting better or getting worse. And I'd like to know perhaps what sort of timescale we will need before we do see that sort of information. And like Julian, the one that's obviously an issue is 8.2, because that figure there is 30% worse than the English average. It's a big difference, and we do need to see what we might be able to do to resolve that matter. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, have you got?
I mean, it depends. I mean, it's always going to be the nature, I think, of the statistics, that the measures we pick up are always going to shift and move. I get the point. It's difficult then to track it all the way through. I think some of them, I know we're in the hands of national statistics and we've got no control over those. I think the others, when they do make the change, they're looking at, can we improve the accuracy of the figure? So hopefully the long term is a better reflection. But if there's any specifically that around the changes that we want to look at or we want to know timescales on, then if you'd let me know which ones, we can certainly look at the timescales for those. That's fine.
Okay, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. On the report that was circulated at the start of the meeting, on page 4, bottom paragraph, is there any extra information that can be given, please?
In relation to what? Roger, what?
It says adult services demand management, and it says the bottom paragraph, there are 2 demand management work streams for adults and children working with insights and performance. They are working with each service area to forecast demand and then map against the mitigations. This work is in progress, but will be key to informing demand management in the future. Is there any more background information of where we are with that? It is part of the one that was there, and it was a response then made.
I don't believe there is. I think that's probably a little bit too much detail for the performance indicators. What's your opinion, Rob?
I didn't have the document that was circulated earlier, so that I'm just going to rely on that one. I mean, I can see that Sam's forwarded round the thing with the responses to the June scrutiny meeting questions that's gone round, and I think that picks up most of the ones that were raised at that meeting. I don't know if you've had that one that came round at 9:39.
Yes, we've done that.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's the response in that to the.
Yeah. It's been included in that. So because it's now been accepted with, can I say, I am concerned that late reports coming out on the day and coming to the committee. I know that the leader of the council has refused to accept reports when they are produced like that for the cabinet. But yeah, it's there and included in that.
Which committee?
I mean, well, yeah. Page 4, it's the actions from the transformation and improvement scrutiny on the 3rd of June. So it's more of an update really, but again, I think if you want more detail about the demand management work streams, that might be something for the task and finish group as opposed to this committee and performance. But James, if you got anything you...
Sorry, it's only just to reiterate the point that was made earlier in relation to the progress that's been made in relation to the work around demand management and the projections and the appropriate understanding of that going forward for this year and next year. So I've talked about it very much from a financial point of view, but underlying that is a model which looks at demand pressures across the adults and children social care areas. So I think that will help to inform the points being made here.
And on today, and I picked up what my colleague said about the EHCP plans and the improvement. We're still not legal, are we? We have they should be done within 20 days or within 20 weeks. And we have now got to the 43%. That is not legal, my understanding is. So when do we expect that we will be have a report which shows that we are doing EHCP plans and the legal requirements require?
I think Roger, you've taken that a little bit out of context, because I don't think you can deem it illegal, because otherwise every council in the whole of the country would be acting illegally. At the present time, there's a backlog in every council with these EHCPs, and actually I know it's been to the People Committee, and we're actually doing quite well in relation to other councils. It may not be good enough, but it's certainly not illegal. And I think what we could do is we could ask the People Committee to actually look at that again at their next committee. But that's as much as we could do, I think.
Yeah, I would support that, Chairman, because we have got other scrutiny committees, but to look at it to see what the expectation is, and if you're not complying with what is legal, then what is the answer? But it is of concern, because I've been approached by people who have been waiting a long time for EHCP, and I noticed that also in the financial report, it said that if I can use the word, those with high needs, the amount is going up, and the extra amount that would have to come out of the school's budget to actually meet the increasing need that is there. So I'm concerned about this, and it is not going to improve as far as that's concerned. And it is in a lot of other councils as well. I understand that, but it is something where this council really needs to put extra resources into it.
And so when were those figures from Rob, because it's a moving feast. You know, the figures move, the percentages move every day. You know, how up to date is that performance data? Perhaps James might know.
I think it's.
Oh, Laura here.
Yeah, that's the position as at the end of quarter one. So obviously we're now nearly at the end of quarter two, so things will be updated on this. And yeah, there's plans. The plans should have improved during quarter two.
Right. Okay. So the performance indicators do go to the people committee in any event. So we should be able to see the updated quarter two figures there. Right. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, you're back again, so she's gone again.
If one other thing, Chairman, if I can, and that is FOIs.
Yeah.
I see in this report, and he concludes a sentence in the report. The ICO advised that Shropshire Council is in the top 20 councils for FOI related ICO complaints. This, coupled with a lower compliance rate, gives the ICO cause for concern. And whilst the council remains amongst the top 20, they will continue to monitor this. So, as I understand it, we're still doing freedom of information only around the 75%. Is that correct? What are we doing about increasing it? Because we are under the microscope for the information coming from them.
I'm sure you asked this question before, because I remember James's answer. Yeah, I do remember the answer.
I did, and have we improved? Are we improving? Because it was not the information that was given before when I highlighted it. And as I say, if we're going to comply, and this paragraph now is in today's report, under HO 17, where are we?
But in fairness, you heard Laura say that's 41 position. I don't know if the position's changed, but it's not James's top priority. I know that. Anyway, I'll leave you off.
So, firstly, it's just really important to just ensure there's that distinction between complaints around FOIs and FOIs. So we're not on the watch list in terms of our response to FOIs. We're in that we've identified in the top 20 councils in relation to complaints around FOIs. Some of those may be in relation to the timing, but the majority are other issues and tend to be quite topic related actually in terms of what's there. So it is a balancing act. As I mentioned before, as an organisation, we need to focus on the financial position to make sure that we survive, and there will be casualties as part of that. And our performance around FOIs may be part of that. Just to be honest, we will try to ensure that our response rate remains reasonable. But I cannot see our compliance rates moving up to 100%, which is where the ICO wants us to be in the near future, because we just simply don't have the resource to do that. So our compliance rates are in the 70s in terms of percent. The biggest issue for me is ensuring that we don't have any FOIs that extend out beyond a sustained period of time. So we're supposed to produce those within 20 days. We'll endeavour to produce them in 20 days. If, however, that means that some of them slip into 20s or even 30s, that may be acceptable. For those to slip into 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond that probably is unacceptable. So therefore, we may not be able to have our compliance rate at the level we would like, but we'll certainly be ensuring that we don't have those outliers as far as we can.
Okay, so Rob Macy wants to say something.
No, I think the only thing I wanted to pick up from that paragraph as well was the meeting on the 7th of August, where the ICO accepted it represented a significant sustained improvement on the 22-23 position. And I think from the point of view of rebuilding our systems and doing the automation and things like that, that sort of work is being built into how the systems are designed to try and make this easier from the start. As we say, we haven't got the human resources to put out this, but that's why the systems are trying to put more of that in place so that information is easy to access, rather than having it for it to be a separate process to go and find the information. We're trying to make it so that that's more available. That should help there as well.
Okay. Thank you. So we've got to come up with a recommendation. I mean, I think I'd like to congratulate the team on some really good work. I think it's the performance indicators are really, really coming along now. And suggest perhaps that I meet up with the officers and Robert in November, so that's after the health, after the people scrutiny, so that if anybody has any performance indicators they want me to bring up with Rob, and if you email them to either Rob or myself, we'll discuss them in November, and then we can try and update and add some more indicators as well. If that's okay, is everyone okay with that? Yep. Okay, so we need to vote on that, or we're all in agreement, I think, on that one. So I think that's okay. Number 8, financial monitoring period 4. A verbal report from James. And I don't think Willem or Willem's here and Ben. Yeah. So would you like to go first, James?
Yeah, so this will just be a brief update. As I mentioned before, period 4, which is as at the end of July. So that information is worked through the system, and the earliest that is available, it's worked out over the August period. So the earliest that becomes available is in the first week of September. As I said, we've been talked to previously. Obviously, the July and August period, there is a significant amount of leave across the organisation. So this has 2 impacts. One is in relation to the level of expenditure and also the work that's done around projections in the July period. And then the sign-off process and the projections fitting into the system over the August period. So as of today, I've only got a broad indication of what that position looks like at the end of period 4. That will be published and will be going to Cabinet in October. But we will be looking to try and progress period 4 and period 5 and period 6 as promptly as we can beyond that, because we get over this period that we're currently in. And what I can say is that the work and the information come out on period 4 has prompted some of the conversations and some of the points I made earlier as part of period 3, i.e. that we need to get a grip on certain areas, that are certain savings that are not being delivered, and that there is that pressure within demand within adults and children's. Before those mitigations in relation to spending controls, the resizing work, and the third-party spend, the position looks less favourable. So it looks like a worsening financial position as at period 4 without those interventions being made. And the reason behind that worsening position is fundamentally getting a grip. So we're putting a tighter grip then around, are these actual savings being delivered? Are these projections in relation to demand in line with what we'd originally projected? So I would expect about that tightening of that position to worsen. And then again, as part of the leave, that means that there are certain questions that we were unable to answer in detail in relation to certain parts of that. So a position which is potentially deteriorating with, however, very quickly to add, more intervention in place, particularly around demand within spending control and within the resizing work, which means that the bottom line figure for period 4 is similar, slightly better than the position at period 3 when those mitigations are in place. Period 5 will give a better indication of those mitigations, because that will start taking the work that we're doing right now. We kicked off on the 1st of September, and period 6 will give the best position in relation to where we are for the remainder of this year. So I can't give you a figure in terms of period 4 because that's not been signed off. But the bottom line at the moment looks like it is slightly better than as at period 3. But when I say slightly better, I'm not talking about millions.
Okay, so have we got any questions? No. I don't really think there's anything we can say apart from thank you, James, for giving us the verbal update and leave it at that. Everyone content with that? Yeah. Item number 9, capital receipts and income strip. So we have a Mr. McDonald in the audience, if he's still awake. Would you like to come and sit at the table with us, please, Richard? Thank you. And I think I've got Dean on screen as well. Who'd like to introduce this? Come sit here if you like. Would you like Richard to introduce the report, James, or are you going to do it?
Unless Dean wants
to do it. Do you want to do it, Dean, or leave it?
No, as I only cover half of the area of the report, I think Richard would be far more across the detail of the whole report.
Right, okay, that's great.
So if I give a very quick introduction, then I'll Richard. Okay, so this is a piece of work that's been pulled together. It talks about capital receipts and also talks about an income strip model, which is being looked at and progressed. So as has been previously mentioned in the Q1 report, item 4 in terms of those 7 risk themes that we identified was around capital receipts delivery. So we know there was a significant amount of capital receipts to be delivered this financial year. And as part of that, ensuring we have a tight grip on that, we've looked at the potential for delivering capital receipts in year, and looked at whether that will be sufficient to meet our requirements. So we know that in terms of capital receipts delivery over the last 3 to 4 years, that level of delivery has been around about the sort of £9 to £10 million a year. And we know that given the level of transformation and the costs associated with that, and just to be clear, those costs include things like cost of redundancies around the voluntary redundancy programme, the costs of the support from third party, from the strategic partner to PwC, but also the costs of transformation within the organisation, which can be all of which can all be appropriately charged to capital. We know that the level of capital receipts we need is significantly in excess of the £9 million that we normally deliver. So what this report sets out is 2 parts. One is progress in relation to the delivery of capital receipts more generally. That is probably of least lesser concern in terms of conversation and discussion and scrutiny. The second part talks about this income strip model. Fundamentally, what this relates to is taking a series of assets and delivering effectively a capital receipt on the back of those assets while retaining the operational ownership, in a sense, of those receipts. From a financial point of view, so I'll stop in terms of what that relates to in terms of implications, and Richard can pick that up. From a financial point of view, what this effectively does is it enables the council to deliver significantly more receipts, which can be used for transformation purposes, so we believe. What it also does is, if we looked at, for example, financial support around borrowing, borrowing would not enable us to use that funding for the purposes that I've set out, so those transformation purposes. So we cannot borrow from PWLB or anywhere else to fund those costs of transformation. We can use receipts, and this enables us to use those receipts. The cost associated with that, there is a revenue cost. That revenue cost, which is seen as effectively loss of income, fundamentally is the cost of borrowing, in a sense, is equivalent in some way to the cost of borrowing should we go through that in a different route. So what you get is the same outcome financially in terms of borrowing, but the receipt that you receive you can use for transformation purposes, which borrowing from PWLB would not allow us to do. That's the reason why we're considering it. From my point of view, the bottom line financially doesn't alter significantly either way. What we get is that capital receipt, those receipts that are coming in that we can use for those purposes. That's the financial outline, and any questions you have about that, I'm happy to pick up, or Ben is. But if I then go over to Richard, who'll give you a little bit more detail around what this really means in a practical sense.
Do you want to ask your question before Richard starts, or when he's finished?
When he's finished.
Right, okay.
I mean, I don't have a great deal to add to that. I think you've covered it very well. Just to say that in a normal year, capital receipts generally anywhere from 3 million to 9 million, which is what we did last year. We do have a schedule of disposals over the forthcoming years of ordinary years, and this year we're on target to somewhere between 10 and 12. It's very hard to put an absolute direct number on it because sometimes we have issues with buyers, sometimes sales fall over. And in the coming years, a lot of the sales that are already pre-prepared are subject to planning. We can't control the outcomes of planning, obviously, or the speed that planning is done. So we're faced this year of needing to raise somewhere in the region of 43 million from capital receipts, which is fairly extraordinary and has to be addressed in another way than just our normal disposal register. So the income script, I think, is a very beneficial way for us to do that, because we are, in essence, looking at disposing, and I say that loosely because we're disposing of a number of car parks which have good revenue, but they do come back to us. So it's a temporary disposal. We're not selling the freeholds, we're selling a long leasehold interest. And in addition to that, we have a lease back arrangement where we continue in possession of the car parks for a period that will be decided when we go to market, but it could be anywhere between 35 years and 50 years. And they would have different receipts associated with it, depending on how long we those lease back for. So I think probably easy for me to put that to the floor and ask for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So I've got Rosemary first, and then David. Oh, and Tony.
Yeah, thank you both. So I've got questions that are for you, James, and for you, Richard, too. So if we look back at the Q1 finance report on capital receipts, there's not really any appreciable movement towards the huge amount, as you said, Richard, of funds that council needs to liquidate, really, or assets that need to be liquidated. It shows us on, actually there is quite a lot of contradiction between the Q1 finance reports and capital, and in this report it's not quite a clear picture. But I think reading through the middle of it, it looks like we've got 1.2 million predicted, and then a potential, a maybe, for 17 million to come in, but either way it doesn't really scratch the surface of 50 million. It says in the report at 2.4, a pipeline of capital receipts is confirmed early in the year to give certainty on resources available to the council. But we're already 5 periods in, aren't we? We're getting towards the middle, really, of the year. So I've got great concerns, as we must all have, about plans that will be delivered early enough in the year to actually help us in this financial year and to get refinancing happening. And it feels like we're slow to act, and that this feels desperate. It feels to me that given what I've said above, we're in a kind of fire sale situation, and this feels to me like a fire sale solution. It feels wrong. It feels like the municipal equivalent of a discredited, the discredited equity release mortgage sector, which is, now in big question. I understand the why, but I do not understand at all this how. I know that the council has its back against the wall, so that, I guess, is the reason for the how. But it doesn't feel good at all. I found other schemes. By just searching and looking at other councils that have used this similar schemes. But typically these are on a different scale, 15, 30 years, something like that, some 20. Nothing of this 125 years with a 50-year break clause. And then, as a Shrewsbury councillor, and all of us as councillor for Shropshire, with Shrewsbury as our county town, the Big Town Plan Partnership, I'm assuming that Shrewsbury Town Council are partners and the BID have been consulted on this, because I think this has huge implications for the Big Town Plan, which is, that crosses all the silos really in the council. And it just risks the master plan, just as we're going to bring the movement strategy part to council in a couple of weeks' time, with traffic reduction at its heart. Traffic reduction at part of the movement strategy, and we're looking to fix our car parks in Aspect. 1 sense. So you said, James, earlier, which I understood to be the case, that we cannot borrow. The council is unable to borrow to fund redundancy payments, so to fund resizing. But isn't this a loan? Is this not a loan? It's a loan by another name at a higher cost in my evaluation. What do the auditors advise about this? Have our auditors been consulted? Yeah. So I look at the valuations involved. I'm not the kind of person who would sit down and do the calculation. You would be able to do it in a moment, James, of what we would spend. We'd get 30, the middle 30s, 34 million, I think it says in the report, of capital released, which immediately covers our need. But then what we would pay back is vast. And how do we compare that to a public loan board loan? You know, the comparison must be outrageous, I would imagine, what the eventual cost will be over 50 years. I'm understanding it right to say that beyond that payment of initial capital, the investor then sits back and waits for the money to roll in every year at 2.2 million. And at 4.6 in the report, it says, if car parking revenues decline as a result of future policy changes, which you want it to do, because it's in our movement strategy, the council will have the option to pay the contractor using other funds. Which other funds? You know, that is kicking down the can down the road on a massive scale, isn't it? On a scale I've never come across. It feels far too cursory for any of us here, any of us, whichever rosette we wear, to actually say we should go with this. I know the council has its back to the wall. I know that. I know we all know that. But this, to me, is really scary, terrifying, in fact.
Yeah, Dean, do you want to go before or after James?
I'll go straight off if that's okay, Chairman. Yeah. And I will be a little bit robust, and forgive me for that, but I've got no other way of saying this than frankly and bluntly. To use the term fire sale in this context not only tells me that you don't actually understand what a fire sale is, but it is damaging to the financial prospects of this authority. Fire sales, markets that we rely on for capital receipts are fickle things. They rely on confidence. They rely on confidence in terms of the value of the assets. They rely on confidence in terms of supply and demand. The primary reasons that we have adopted and continue to adopt the capital disposals programme that we have done, and the reason that we've been looking to explore other alternatives for raising capital, is to avoid flooding the market in a single year with large numbers of assets for disposal. That would be a fire sale. Now, this is not a fire sale, but putting the perception out there through the inadvisable use of language like that risks breaking the confidence of the market and failing to realise the value that we could for assets in a confident market. So I would ask all members in what is a public meeting that anybody, including potential purchasers of assets, can be listening to use the choice of language carefully, because this is not a fire sale, but nothing could be more damaging to the council's prospects of achieving its targets than giving the misleading impression that it is.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Right, James, would you like to answer the rest of the question?
Yeah. So it said this is effectively a loan. It's not, but the easiest way to think of it is that, because fundamentally what we are doing is we're getting a receipt. However, there will be a revenue consequence of paying that back. Now, if we went to PWLB, and we borrowed 30 odd million pounds, then, and we paid that back over 25 to 50 years, which is what we do, then the cost annually will be similar to these sorts of figures. Okay, so it's not significantly different. What that figure will come out at depends on negotiation. And that negotiation is really important. Going back to the Councillor Dean's points earlier on, we want to drive out the best deal that we can in relation to this. So fundamentally, if we as a local authority, and this has been discussed by the previous government and the next government, the current government, in relation to exceptional financial support, should be provided with a freedom which would enable us to borrow to fund transformation purposes, then we would go to PWLB, we would borrow, and there would be a revenue implication. So if you think about it from that point of view, we don't have that power. We can't do that at the moment. So if you think about that basic principle, what we are saying is the revenue implication of that borrowing is the revenue implication that's shown within here, and the receipt that we get is the same as the borrowing that would come in. So what we therefore have is the ability to generate that money upfront and the understanding of the financial consequences of that. So the fact that the assets are themselves income generating in terms of car parks is really helpful, because as a covenant from the local authority, we're saying these are assets that earn income. Therefore, to a potential investor, that's positive. From the point of view of the investor, they don't care where the money comes from. They just want the local authority to fund that. What we're saying is we generate far in excess of this value through car parking income. However, we will retain through the powers that this enables the ability to set car parking charges. The cost, although we're setting it out in this way, fundamentally the cost will be accounted for as a growth item in expenditure in exactly the same way that had we taken out a PWLB loan, that cost would be accounted for within the authority. So there isn't that direct link between the income. We could make a decision to stop charging income on car parks. So we could take to reduce those or whatever that may be. As long as we've got that cost over here built in, which is to pay over that period of time, the organisation that we end up working with would be agnostic to that point. So the points that you are making are fundamentally correct in terms of the implications. What you have to bear in mind is that we are borrowing money, and we will be borrowing significant amounts of money this year. That's already built into our Treasury strategy. We know that we have prevented borrowing over the last 4, 5, 6, well, no, probably 10 years. Because interest rates have been so low, we haven't had to go out and borrow. So therefore, our cash position as a local authority is now significantly lower than it has been, say, 2, 3 years ago. Lots of reasons for that, but one of the main reasons is we haven't been undertaking any borrowing. So we will be this year undertaking, and it could be over £100 million worth of borrowing. This, in my view, is another element of that. All of which those revenue implications are built into our Treasury strategy to work that forward. So therefore, what we get is that you look at that portfolio of borrowing that we would have, we'd have some from money market, some from PWLB, and an income strip model, all of which would be comparable. I'm not going to say one is going to be vastly better than the other, but they're broadly comparable in terms of the cost of revenue across that portfolio. Of that portfolio, the advantage of taking this particular route is that that enables all of this money over here to be used for other purposes, but this over here can be used for transformation purposes. That's why we would look at this as part of that rounded portfolio.
Okay, so I've got David, Tony, Roger, and Julian. Oh, right, yeah, sorry.
I asked questions about the big town partnerships.
Yeah.
I could probably address it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And you know, obviously there's different options as to how we might structure a deal here. And one of them is an outright disposal, which we would lose control, and yes, it would put the big town plan at risk. If we would have no further control, someone else would own that land, and someone else would be controlling. In this scenario, we retain control, and we also retain the ability to substitute assets. So if we want to take one out and put something else in as security, we can do that. And as they are car parks, essentially unimproved land. The investor that's bought the income strip off us is looking at this from a prospect of security, asset security to our income strip. If we improve that security, if we want to build on that, if we want to build whatever it might be, classrooms for the college, hotel, something that is deemed economically viable and growth, it can still be done. The only issue would be that the rent that's payable on that particular piece of land. So at the moment, there's 10 properties within the income strip. If one of them is selected for another use, we can either substitute it or it can incorporate the base rent that is payable on that into the numbers for the new development. So it's still absolutely flexible.
Yep.
And does that mean that generally that is the case, that flexibility exists, or is it something that has to be written?
We will build it into the legal documentation of the sale.
Okay, and if we were to improve the car park and turn it into something else, does that make it more valuable and more expensive for us to rent back?
No, it doesn't. The base rent is set for that period of what is
and that's it.
Part of it. If we choose to improve it and we improve our income or we improve our position as a result of that, that's our bid.
Okay, so David next.
Yeah, I'm very worried about this. I think it's advancing to the unknown, really, and I worry about the future because from the scenario you just explained just now. For example, if we wanted to reduce the number of car spaces, to have more disabled spaces, for example, and that would maybe reduce our income, then future authority would actually have to fund that, presumably on the basis of the scenario you're outlining. Because what you're doing is actually, it's not just a loan in a traditional sense. It's what you're doing is the income could vary. Like in a normal loan, you know exactly how much you're going to be paying back over the years to come. In this case, you can't be certain that the revenue is going to fulfill the commitment you've made. Do you see what I mean?
We can't be sure of that, but the land doesn't have a nil value to the council, and at the moment, you couldn't just assume you would cut the revenue of the car park, I don't know, by putting more disabled space without having an effect on the council. So it makes no difference anyway to that respect because it does have a value.
But the other thing, given the financial position we're in at the moment, given our reserves are down to a trickle, surely, the problem is, for future years, what you're saying is this is over a 50-year period. So we're saying over the next 50 years, we won't have that income from car parks. We won't, and we might actually have to pay a bit more because the car park income has reduced. So that's one of the things for the future of this authority, the long-term future of this authority. This is a disastrous move because you're taking out an income stream, which means that and okay, it's there to transform the budget, but in actual fact, we know that there are enormous problems with achieving the savings that have been identified. And so what I worry is that it might solve the problem this year, but in future years, the situation is going to be even worse because that income stream is all gone. The other thing that's concerned me, I Councillor Barton, this is 50 years. You're talking about 150 years. I mean, I won't be here in 50 years, let alone 150. I mean, it is ridiculous, I think, to engage in a policy with such long-term implications for this authority and for future councils. It effectively means that the councils will be more and more constrained about what choices they have. The other thing which hasn't been mentioned in this report is delegation of officers. There are a number of points in this report where the decisions are being delegated to officers in a way which I think is very, very worrying because, councillors should actually be in control. They should actually make decisions on important decisions. And here we have a fundamental change in the way in which the council, but effectively as director borrows money, and yet councillors are being kind of written out of the prospect. So out of that process, and this to me is a step too far. And what's more, what this money, a lot of this money to be doing is paying for consultants. Effectively, we're taking the money from the car parks and they're going to pay consultants, and it just seems to me fundamentally wrong. I totally object to it. I think it's wrong, and I think we should all vote against it.
But you're a little bit confused on some of the things there. Anyway, do you have any comments to make on that or not? Not particularly.
I think just to clarify a couple of things. Firstly, the 50-year lease back is one end of the scale. It could be between as low as 25 and 50 years. This is something that will reflect the offers we get when we go to the market. And clearly we want to do it as less as possible, but it depends on what gap also we need to plug when it comes time to closing. The other point is, I think, just on the revenue. So the rental payable on the income strip is set between 60 and 80% of the net revenues. So the net revenues we received in the last financial year. And this financial year is already predicted to be higher than the last financial year. So the coverage that council has, we are receiving more than we're paying on the income strip. So it is covered. If I look at modelling that, and the income strip is set at essentially CPI capped and collared at between 1% and 4%. The government target for inflation is 2%. So if we look at anywhere between let's say the 35 and the 50 years of increasing that rental payable by an average of 2% per annum, and if we look at holding the income we receive without increasing at all, so in other words, just where we sit now, increasing at 2% and not increasing any parking revenue, we end up in year 14 at parity between what we're receiving and what we're paying. On a 35-year income strip, we would end up at 9.5 million negative, but actually we would get it back, and we've already received on a 35-year income something like 29 million up front. So it ends up 19.5 million positive. And on a 50-year deal, it ends up at parity at the end when you consider what you get front end, what you pay, using those parameters. So it is quite predictable. It is probably a better rate than we would get on a loan, certainly from PWLB, because that would be assuming around 5% interest, and the yield on this would be less than that, what we would get.
Okay, so I'm just conscious of the fact we haven't had a break, and I've got David's going to ask a bit more. I've got Tony, Roger, Julian, Tom, and Heather. So I do just wonder whether, I mean, do people want to just stop for 5 minutes to have a comfort break? We've been going for 2.5 hours, or
stop for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But
Can
only
we
5
stop?
minutes.
Yeah. Let's just let David finish off his question, and then we'll stop for 5 minutes because we've been going 2.5 hours. Okay. You want to come back on something, David?
Yeah, look, I mean, one of the problems with it is this 50-year. I mean, it's 50-year. We get control back. That's effectively there's a break at the 50-year point. So effectively, you can't, although you might negotiate different terms.
It could be less. It depends what we negotiate at this point.
So it could be 20 years, 30 years, whatever.
The likely scenario is 35 to 50 is the realm to model the values. Determines the upfront payment we get is dependent on how long we give.
If they wanted maximum amount of money, they're going to go for 50
Yeah.
years.
So if we need the maximum we can get, we've got to give the 50 years.
Yes, in the report, it makes clear what you're looking for is 50 years. Yeah, I mean that's the basis of it, really, isn't it? You're, and if, for example, I mean, I know you've done the sums on the actually comparison between the income you get in the car park and the lump sum at the beginning, but If, for example, the town council, the council decided to reduce the number of parking spaces, or if car usage changed over that period, which is a long period, there could be significant changes in car usage in that period. That something might not add up in the way that you're predicting. We can't, and we don't really want more and more cars coming into the Shrewsbury town centre, and therefore I think that's one of the problems I have. And the other thing is, it's probably not for you to answer, but I do worry about this issue of delegation of officers, which hasn't been nobody's responded to. I do think that council should have more improvement in the way in which these details. Obviously, there are lots of details here, and it's unfortunate that we didn't actually get a greater warning of this, and the paper wasn't issued a bit earlier. But I do think that we need to have more council involvement in the way in which this policy is developed, which I don't really agree with. I just think that's very important.
Can I just say a couple of things, David? It's been pointed out that this is cheaper than a loan works board loan. We don't lose ownership of the car park. And if, for instance, we put a hotel instead of the car park, we will be coining it in. So we're not going to lose ownership of it. And the chances are, if we altered it in any way, we'd be making shed loads more money. But anyway, okay, so I'm going to stop now, I think, and we'll resume in 5 minutes. Is that okay? And we'll get Tony's up next, yeah?
Yes.
So just bear with me
1 second.
Yeah, we're now live.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, most of my the issues that I wanted to raise have already been raised by Rosemary and David. But Rosemary asked the question about what would happen to the rental if we were if we made improvements. And I think the answer given was it wouldn't.
Doesn't change.
Wouldn't affect it.
The rental
Yeah.
is fixed to inflation, kept in equilibrium.
But what if we're forced to improve the nature of the car parks? Because 40, 50 years time, no petrol cars, no diesel cars, only electric or something different to that. And the government decides that for every 10 spaces, you're going to have one charger. So 500 spaces on Frankwell, 50 chargers. Who's going to pay? Are we going to have to pay to put those in?
It would be a payment and a benefit as well from the people plugging in. They'd be paying for the charging, so there would likely be a rental charges that we would get because we're.
But the initial cost we would make. Yeah.
Maybe, but I mean, it would be up to us to do the best business deal. At the moment, you can put charging infrastructure in on car parking where we get a rental per year and someone else wants the cost of the actual installation.
Okay. What about our parking enforcement team? Are all of these car parks going to be given to one provider, or is it intended that they might go to 10 different providers?
It's no different to the way it's structured now as far as we decide as and when, how we want to run them. We have possession of the car parks in the same way that we have now. And control.
So we would control the car parks,
yes,
even if different people were paying the rent?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Tony. So, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to read a paragraph out first, because it's been made plain that this money is going to fund, it is hoped, transformation and redundancy. And I'll read out this paragraph. The guidance issued by the Secretary of State on the 2nd of August 2022 contains the following. Capital receipts used under the direction, which is what being here now, capital receipts used under the direction must be for genuine disposals, qualifying disposals. That is, disposals where the authority does not retain an interest directly or indirectly in the assets once the disposal has occurred. Where the authority retains some exposure to the risks and rewards of the assets following disposal, it must not use any capital receipts from that disposal under the powers provided by the direction. Authorities should not be looking to exploit strategies to retain an interest in assets that it has disposed of, whilst using the sale proceeds to fund revenue costs. To me, this is a daft proposal. I would even use the word lunatic proposal to dispose of assets and then say that we're going to use it to fund redundancy and transformation costs. The way I read that, it isn't legal. And if you read the report, it says there that legal advice will need to be taken. But it's also said that it would be cheaper than taking a loan. If we take a loan out, that's a fixed amount that's paid every year. This is an increasing debt that will have to be paid every year. And it was said that in 14 years, we'll be paying £9.5 million a year to whoever has bought the original lease. £9.5 million. As I understand it, it increases by whatever the parking charge is, and up to in 35 years, it would be a negative. It would be more unless we increase the parking charge. That to me was the words that were used. But suddenly the council is going to have a continuing debt. As I say, it's daft, lunatic. You should only take debt, borrow when you want and need a sum of money. This sum of money is to provide transformation and redundancy. And I read that paragraph out, and has any other authority done this? I understand there's one or two that have used it to build houses, but never with a car park. And I would be interested if it is there. But I could go on, Chairman. To me, I don't support it. I think it is daft idea to do it. If we need capital, we can go out and borrow it. Now we should have borrowed it maybe 3 years ago when the interest rate was lower. But to do it now to fund what is said it is going to do seems daft and not acceptable in any respect.
Okay, but Roger, I think when you're saying things, and it's a bit like Dean said earlier, you know, you have to give the public the truth. And year 15, I think the repayment's £2 million, not £9 million. So I just think you need to, if you quote anything, you make sure you quote the right figures, not something that you just.
Yeah, through you, Chairman, I thought it would increase by 2%, and it would increase compared with the value of the income from the car park. And the example that was quoted was that. Have I misheard? Will it increase beyond the 2.2 million that is being quoted in the report?
Sorry, can I?
Yeah, okay, James, you come in.
A lot of what you said is completely incorrect. I've just got to put that on record. What you said is completely incorrect. And I do take objection to officers being told that they're being idiotic and making stupid decisions. This is officers that have come forward with this proposal. So the remarks you're making are directed at officers, just to be clear. So in terms of the actual position, which is not what Councillor has just said, we have a proposal. I don't want to go into detail of talking about specific figures because we are going to go out to the market and we're going to ask and try and get the best position that we can. To suggest that we will pay £9.8 million at the end of this is completely incorrect. Completely incorrect. We will be paying an amount. The report talks about a figure of around about £2 million. It would be significantly lower than that in the first years, and then there would be an inflationary impact on that, linked to CPI, linked to a cap and collar, so it wouldn't go outside of a particular area, so that we have control over that period. We cannot borrow for revenue purposes. This allows us to use this receipt for these purposes. Now, I've been very careful in referring to this as a receipt and not as a capital receipt for exactly the purposes that you read out at the start. So this is not a capital receipt. There is no question about that. And we are taking legal advice, we're taking advice from our treasurer, and we're taking advice from our external auditor, all of which were referenced previously. That advice, should that come back and suggest that there is any way this is not a proposal which stacks up, I'm not even going to go near idiotic. This is not a proposal that does not stack up, then we would not implement it. Simple as that. If, however, based on the information that we have, and apologies for this report coming out late, but this actually has been worked on for several months now. This is not off the back of a fact packet. This is a serious strategy that enables us, as I referred earlier, as part of our wider portfolio, to enable us to deliver what we need to deliver for this council this year financially. Okay, we need to deliver receipts in this year that we can use. We cannot borrow. So the suggestion that we should have borrowed years ago when interest rates were low, I've already addressed that one. When rates were lower, we had more cash in the bank than we needed. End of. Therefore, we did not borrow. Therefore, we saved significant amounts of money for this authority by being able to use the funds that we've got in our bank at that point, which were in excess, and prevent borrowing. So yes, we could have borrowed at a lower rate a few years ago, and in a few years' time, maybe we'll be able to borrow at a lower rate again. That is why you spread your borrowing over a long period of time. That's why we have a treasury strategy. That's why we have treasury advisors that ensure that we are making decisions that are appropriate. We can all go back and rewrite history and say, well, if we'd done this a couple of years ago, we'd be better now. We can't actually do that physically. So the reality is, this is a proposal as part of a portfolio of borrowing of receipts, capital receipts, general receipts, and borrowing that we will undertake over the next few years to ensure that we have financial stability for this authority. And while I'm fully understand that members on seeing this will have lots and lots of questions and will be confused about what this would mean. Already we've got into the realms of, do we retain control over the car parks? We will not own those car parks because they will be, the asset is transferred in that sense, but we will retain ownership of the delivery operation of that car park. We will be responsible for maintenance. We will be responsible for setting the income, the parking charges. We will be responsible for enforcing it. We will be responsible for taking that money in or not, as the case may be. All of that doesn't change. The fact that this will deliver a receipt and there will be a revenue cost isn't changing that. So we will have to build into the budget the fact that this is a receipt that we'll have to pay for. That will be built into the budget, and I've said before, the organisation that we work to will be completely ambivalent as to whether that money comes from car parking or wherever. Fundamentally, what they're looking for is the local authority has a way of generating income that will enable them to sign that over a long period. What we then do, providing we stick within the requirements of that agreement, is up to us. So we retain car parks, we retain the operation of those car parks. We can still fit in with the big town plan. We can still make those adjustments as necessary. We will understand the revenue information and we will just build it in every year as part of our medium-term financial strategy. I hope that clears up some of the uncertainty that's been caused.
Just a brief comeback, Roger.
Yeah.
Are you going to apologise first, or are you going to ask questions?
I'm going to ask a question which is pertaining to what I said a few minutes ago. Will the payment to whoever leases the car park to us, I think that's a correct term, will the payment to that person or company increase as the years go on?
So, through your chair, to be clear, it says in the report that there's a cap and collar arrangement that increase would be between 1% and 4%. So it would be based on CPI, but we would cap it and collar it so that we are clear on what the implications of that are. So yes, there will be a payment, a lower payment that's been advised in here as an average. So that payment will start and then it will increase within a restriction over the years. Yes.
For you, Chairman, the word average doesn't appear to my knowledge in it. But so what we're saying is that the payment that paid to the person who takes ownership of that car park, even though it's maybe a limited ownership, that payment would increase as the years go by.
Through your chair, again, to be absolutely fair, it increases by whatever
the collar.
So we would know, we would be able to budget. It will never be an increase of more than. We know exactly what the payment is that we agree up front, and then we'll be saying it will be no more than this going forward. So if it's PWLB, we tend to go with fixed rates, so it's the same value. So all that means is that value is built in. If we go with variable, then that would that you potentially get a better rate initially, but then you're open to the market. What this does is it gives us a rate which will move up, but we know the parameters of that increase every year. So we will build that in our worst case scenario that we've budgeted for every year going forward. And then should circumstances, i.e. high levels of income or low levels of inflation come into play, then we will be paying less than we budgeted.
Yes, the figures I quoted were wrong. Working that out, if they increase by 2, 3, 4%, yep, in 14 years, it won't get up to the figure that I quoted, but it will be higher than what we're talking about now.
Yeah, and you're going to say sorry for the inappropriate language to the officers, are you, Roger?
I don't think that is. I did consider other words which would have been inappropriate.
Okay, well, I'll apologise on your behalf. Sorry. Okay, Julian's next.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of comments to start with. First of all, I think just to pick up on Dean Carroll's point, I think there are actually considerably bigger threats to this council than the council for scaring the horses in the capital markets. But I also actually have to express my solidarity and sympathy with James Walton on this particular occasion. I do think there's a certain amount of quite a remarkable misunderstanding. I think I understood it. But I want to clarify, and rather than asking a whole series of questions, getting you to answer, I'm going to just ask you to nod, because I think so. So as I get it, we have to pay something, but what we pay is not directly related to what we charge in the car park. So our charges in the car parks could go up and down. We could turn them into fields. We could build houses on them. We'd still have to repay. At one point, interestingly, you said that we could actually transfer the asset for these payments. In other words, it doesn't even have to be those car parks. If presumably by negotiation, we could transfer the asset. Substitute the asset. Sorry, that was the exactly. So, but nevertheless, the questions that it does remain, and I think they relate to the questions that Tony asked, are to do with Big Town Plan and the actual, what we can do with the asset. So from what you're saying, it sounds like we could change the number of spaces. We could put solar canopies on it. We retain all those sorts of controls, which is reassuring. The question then becomes, so why are we doing this with the car parks? Why isn't there a different asset which wouldn't have resulted in this row? Why aren't we doing it with the Frankwell building? Why is there not another building where there's clearly a long-term history that's staying more or less what it is, where we could do this in income strip? Why have we chosen to do it for the car parks?
I mean, if I may through chair, I'll let Richard come in, but in a sense, it's in the title. It's an income strip. It's income that you're stripping from the asset. So the Guildhall, for example, doesn't generate income in that way. If it was income generating asset, if it was leased out, then potentially you could. I think the point behind this is the strength of the covenant that's being provided helps to drive. So from an investor's point of view, they want to give the minimum amount in the capital receipt for the maximum amount of benefit that they get back. What they're looking for is some certainty around the income that will be coming back. So if you talk about an asset which is, let's just say, example of Guildhall, let's say that there are a few organisations in there, they may take a view on, is that really going to generate income into the future? With car park, they would be looking and saying, actually, that's an asset that we can see is generating significant amount of income. It's in a place where we think that's going to continue. So that helps in terms of those negotiations. It's a separate then decision around, as I say, where that income actually comes from. But in terms of the asset, that's the starting point for those discussions.
And so just to follow that up very quickly, so I mean, I suppose, what surprises me about that, and I'm not an investor, but if I was an investor, it sounds like an investor would have to be remarkably stupid to not understand that there are lots of other income sources that councils have, and that it might not come from the car parking charges, it might come from somewhere else. But that we have to reassure them that money is going to come because there's people putting money in the parking machine. Seems a bit strange to me, but if that's the way the market works, then surely there are plenty of income streams they could be reassured about.
I think
what I'm wondering is why it's the car park.
Okay, so we can't be here all day.
Yeah.
But in the simplest of terms, the car park is so straightforward. Okay, it's not complicated by lots of different tenants or whatever. It is what it is. It's just there. And it would be really, really simple to do. And I think from a commercial point of view, if we're going to do something, we have to do something relatively quickly. And it's the simplest thing to do. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I've got to go because I've got a joint.
Yes.
Can I have just say what I want to say?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Sorry, Julian.
That's okay. You've answered.
Yeah.
I think there are a number of issues around this, but what has become absolutely clear is that this is the council between a rock and a hard place. Basically, you have to do this if you're going to pay for the redundancies and so on. And so we're in a position where if we don't do this, we're in a very, very tricky position. Or can we raise the money in another way?
I mean, if I may, Chair, to come in at that point, there are alternatives. I mean, we could sell the car parks.
Great.
So just an example. So there are things that we could do to generate capital receipts. The point that's being made here is that through a series of consideration over a period of time, we believe that this is the best option to deliver.
So this brings me perfectly, James, to my next point, which is actually if there's been a bit more detail, some other options, some modelling, actually it's much easier to scrutinise and decide whether this is a good deal or not. We have one option. We don't have. I'd like to know the modelling around extra use of the park and ride. Are the park and rides included in this? Or not, because if they are, and we change the way we transport, and there's all sorts of mitigations and so on put in here, but there's lots of other information that actually would make me feel much more safe about making a decision one way or another.
Yeah, can I just say, stop you there, Heather, a bit, because I think we're in danger of tweaking the price down.
No.
And no, but what I'm saying to you is, if you've got these questions, I think they would be much better placed to ask them in a private session at the task and finish group, as opposed to here in open session because of the commercial sensitivity.
In which case, it's pointless scrutinising these things, because we're asking the appropriate questions around this, and now you're telling me we need to do it. We need to go into private session.
No. What I'm saying is we're being asked to accept the principle. What you're doing is asking some very detailed commercial questions that will be better placed to be answered privately as opposed to here.
I have no other options here to be able to look at. And that modelling. And if that's the case, we should have had a private session around scrutiny, because this is hobbling scrutiny doing its job. And I may well have come out in favour if I could have had those questions asked. I now need to go and join post.
Okay, all right then. Thank you, Heather. So sorry. So Julian's going as well. Okay, so we've just left with Tom here. Tom.
Yeah, well, thanks, Chair. I actually do support the principle of this. I actually see it as a very neat idea. I can see it as a sort of reasonably sophisticated financial instrument, and I'm actually happy with the concept of it. I think it is something that we should actually be embracing. We've talked about. I had two questions. One was lack of opportunity. Well, we've talked about that, and that's great. We can do all sorts of things. We don't lose the opportunity. My other question is just, as I always ask, is counterparty strength. That's a key issue, and I'll leave it there. But I do support the principle very much.
Okay. Do you need? I'm very conscious of time. Is there any other comments you want to make, James or Richard? No. Okay. Then I think I'm quite happy to accept the report. Thank Richard for coming, and thank him for all the work he's doing in assets. Everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
No dissent, apart from
I'm voting
Roger.
against.
Pardon?
I'll be voting against.
All right. Okay. One against. Okay. Okay. Right. So, is everyone happy with my recommendation? Everybody's happy apart from Roger. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move on now. We've got the yeah. Thank you, Richard. So we've got a couple of people who've got to leave, and we've got item number 10, which is the annual customer feedback report. And I think Rob Macy isn't here either.
Chair.
Nigel.
Chair.
Nigel's here.
Chair, Rob's on his way. I've just called him out when I need to.
Oh, well, Nigel could probably do it, I suspect. I don't know. Sit here, Nigel. Hopefully we won't be too long. Sorry about that. It's been a long time. Would you like to introduce the report and talk to?
Yes, certainly. If I could just ask, through the chair, if the main reports author, Sarah Dodds, who leads the feedback and insight team, can just quickly join us online, and I'll give a very brief overview.
Okay, yes, sorry. Is Sarah joining us, or?
She should be joining us. As I'm sure members are aware, that customer feedback is a very useful instrument to gain feedback from our customers and residents, and each year the council produces a report that looks at the numbers of complaints and compliments and the intelligence and insight that some of that provides, with the opportunity to drive a culture of ongoing improvement and learning. The report before you covers the previous financial year and has been slightly extended to include information about the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's Complaint Handling Code, which is due to come into effect in April 2026. I'll just pick out some highlight numbers from the report. In the previous financial year, we received 2,629 cases of formal feedback, and that is a very similar figure to the previous year. Complaints formed almost 74% of all feedback cases. It's a slightly higher proportion than the previous year. In total, we received 978 complaints that were investigated by the council. That is down year on year, I want to say, by around 17%. Of those, 191 were statutory adult services complaints and 36 were statutory children's service complaints. And statutory complaints are handled under a set of national processes with clear timescales. It comes as no surprise that those services that touch the most people, such as highways, will receive the highest number of complaints. But there has been a continuing ongoing reduction in the proportion of complaints for highways. In 2022, highways accounted for 27% of all the complaints the council received, and that is now down to 12% in the latest report. I've referred to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, who looked at 81 complaint cases in the year, and of those, 24 were investigated in full, and of those, only 19 were upheld. That produces an upheld rate of 79%, and that is very similar to the year before, and it is almost exactly in line with the average for similar authorities published by the LGSCO. And it should be borne in mind, given that that figure looks at a very small number, it can be influenced by just a change of 1 or 2 in the total number of cases that are considered. As I referred to in the introduction, the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman is looking to implement a new complaint handling code for corporate complaints, excluding children and adults, that would particularly significantly alter complaint response times. Now, the Ombudsman has issued this code as advice and guidance for all councils, and the code is being piloted, and there's an expectation that authorities will adopt that by April 2026. And I think the council needs to take more time to consider some of the implications of that and bring a further report back to councillors in due course in the next year.
Okay, thank you. We do have Sarah Dodds online. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, Sarah.
Hello, yes, Sarah Dodds. I'm the council's feedback and insight team leader.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So if we have any questions, we will get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
People are listening now. Know who we're talking to. Right, we've got 2, 3. Rosemary, Tony, and then Roger.
Thank you, Nigel and Sarah. Just a quick question. Nigel, you perhaps won't be aware, but before us we've got responses to this committee in June, and one of the first items refers to the channels through which comments, in fact, communication from residents come into council, and there's quite a lot of fluctuation in that. I'm sure it's something that you're familiar with. I mean, we always worry as we go more to web formats, for people to complain. The phone system perhaps is less available to the public than it used to be, and so on and so forth. Are we confident that we're able to capture our communications, whether good or bad, from residents of all abilities and ages perhaps, or and so on, through the various channels that we use?
Certainly, as far as I'm aware, there are a number of different ways that residents can log their comments or complaints with the council. We're not reliant on web forms. yes, the nature of the way that people communicate with us now, that becomes the most common way, but there are what I term much more traditional ways that people can make their views known to us. And I don't know whether Sarah wants to come in and add any more to that.
I can add, if that's okay.
What I was going to say was, somebody told me the other day a first class postage stamp's 165 now, so I'm not surprised that the letters has gone down. But anyway, sorry, carry on, Sarah.
Thank you. So more and more people are choosing to use email or online forms to submit their complaints, but it's very clear in national guidance that choice must be provided. We're conscious that many of the people making, particularly those making adult and social care complaints, may be more vulnerable and may not wish to use electronic means. Phone is an option if people phone a customer services department, and they can record details and pass them on to the team, and one of the team will phone back. We also have some small numbers of people who still wish to communicate by letter, maybe because they prefer large text, but all options are available and we plan to maintain that.
Right, so Tony's next and then Roger. Tony.
Okay, just to pick up on that survey information that we had received from June. I mean, perhaps not surprising, as knowing how people operate, that when they're complaining, they tend to use email or the web, and when they're complimenting, they're more likely to use the telephone and face to face, as is shown there. But no, my point was to do with this potential change from 2026, when instead of having 30 days to deal with a complaint, we've got 10 with potentially another 10, and so 20 potentially in total. And I know it's early days yet, and we talked about coming back to committee with views on this, but that I think will create quite a significant change for the way we have to look to do things in the future because of that shortening of the timescale. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes back to committee as to how we're going to deal with that. Thank you.
Okay. Have you got any comment to make on that, Sarah? No?
I don't know. I think Councillor Parsons' observation is absolutely correct.
Yes. Okay, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Compliments on the report. There's a lot of statistics in it. It's interesting reading. And to take up the point that was just made, yeah, coming down to 10 days, if there's a lot of investigation to do, is going to be difficult. And I'm not sure how we're going to manage that. But I do note in the report, it says April 26 to come down to 10 days. But then elsewhere in the report, I saw 25, 26. We will need to come down to 10 days. So is it after April 26 we need to come down, or in that year ending then that we need to be the 10 days? Because we, the council, may need to alter how it is progressed in order to actively carry out what is expected.
The expectation for the ombudsman is that they will start applying their new guidance in their casework from April 2026.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've had a very long meeting. Sorry we haven't got back to you, Rob.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to come back in for this item just in case. But
so, is everyone content? We accept and note the report. Yeah. Thank you. So you can go back to your meeting. Thank you very much indeed for your patience. Okay, so item number 11. The title of the item number 11 is alternative budgets. But actually, what's happened over the last 2 years with the alternative budgets hasn't particularly worked well for any of the groups, I would say. So what I would propose, and is William's up here on the screen, After talking about this with Gwilym and a few others, I think probably the best way forward would be to actually set up what is essentially a financial task and finish group, and have the leader of Labour, so that's Rosemary, the vice chair, which is Tony. With the Liberals, we've got Heather and Roger. With the Greens, we've got Julian, and with the Independents, I believe we've got Mr. Towers. To actually come together with obviously Gwilym, myself, Leslie, who's the leader of the council, Ian, who's the deputy leader of the council, and actually sit round the table and have some very detailed financial conversations. That's my proposal. I believe that that the group leaders have spoken about this, and I think they're quite content with that particular arrangement. So I don't know if anybody got anything else to say.
Could I come in, please, Claire?
Yeah, go on, Gwilym.
Thank you. There's multiple reasons why we should be doing this. One is about I'm constantly being accused, and the officers have been accused about lack of transparency. This will give us a process whereby nobody's getting any other information than what's actually on the table. And more than that, and what is vitally important, I think, more than anything this year, is to give the officers time to actually deliver the savings. And by us actually only going over the ground once and us all having the same information, that is going to save the officers an awful lot of time. Thank you.
Yeah. Have you got any comments, right, Rosemary?
Yeah, thank you. It's a huge change, isn't it, that's being proposed, that we don't have a lot of cross-party working in council in terms of decision making. So I have got a few questions. So can I just understand again the makeup of that group that you're proposing, Claire?
Okay, so obviously 2 from each group. So that would be the leader, Leslie, Ian, who's the deputy leader of the council. Then there would be yourself and Tony. Then it would be Roger and Heather. And then there would be Julian and Ed Towers, Gwilym, and myself. So I think it would be skewed. It will be pretty much even Stevens, really. And the whole point about it is, as Gwilym said, is that we have the meetings and it is absolutely cards on the table. Everyone's getting the same information. And then hopefully we can work together to hopefully find some solutions and a constructive way forward, instead of everyone knocking lumps out of one another. Oh, we have the leader who wants to say something.
I think.
Yes, of course you can. Did you just curtsy?
No, I didn't. No, I got it.
Like it from here.
Also,
no, I think if you don't mind me just saying a few words, I think there's a couple of things from my perspective. I've heard today the words, backs against the wall. We know how difficult the financial situation is, blah, blah, blah. We know that. There's no hiding that. And I think from one of my perspective is that we've always tried to be as open and transparent as possible. Moving forward to 25, 26, we are, I seriously hope we do retain control of our finances over this next 12 months. But I think, the problems of this 12 months and last 12 months are not going away. That demand continues to rise. So from my perspective, it made far more sense, rather than the officers having to sit with 5 individual groups and go through all this work, which has never been, personally, I don't think has ever been, and this is not a reflection on the officers, James, I don't think it's ever worked for anybody particularly. I think this gives us an opportunity to sit around the table as 10, 11 councillors to produce the very best budget we can for 25, 26 for Shropshire Council. Regardless of, because
I think where our political differences lie is very often in the capital side of things, not in the revenue side of things. And as you will know, because you read the reports just as well as I do, there is so limited room in those budgets. It's not about policy decisions very often. It's actually about where that money is spent and where that money goes. So that's one of the reasons why, and I meant what I said in the email that I sent to you. I hope we can go down this route and do this, because I am seriously concerned. Well, I'm not even going to say I'm seriously concerned. I'm going to say that the officers do not have the time this year to go through an alternative budget process.
Basically.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I'd like to ask a couple of basic questions. So, for example, at what stage of development is the budget for 25-26 at this point?
I've got no idea. That's a James question.
I suppose the most important point for me to make would be there have been no discussions, certainly material discussions, with the administration about the 25-26 budget this year. So there's nothing. I'm not sure where the question is landing, but in terms of there haven't been any discussions on 25-26 with cabinet. Certainly not material conversations. They know as much as you.
Yeah, Tony.
Yeah, but looking at the discussion that we've already had today, I mean, it could be that we have a general reserve of 300k going into 25-26.
Yeah, and that wouldn't cut it. We wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, for me, just my take on it. I think the next 6 months are going to be tough, and hopefully, if we can all work together, we can find a way forward. And I think that's what I'm hoping, that we'll a sensible way forward, because at the end of the day, we all want Shropshire Council to continue and thrive.
Could I just briefly come in, Claire? I think on both those points, that what I would actually say is this isn't just about doing the budget for next year. You've seen the midterm financial strategy, which actually goes from now to 2030, and that's what we've got to look at. Now, obviously, the budget we do for next year will be very much concerned about what we deliver in this year. And that's what we've been talking about today, obviously. So a foundation for the budget perhaps has been put in place of what we put in the MTFS in February, of what we thought it was going to be at that stage. But obviously, lots of things change. So that's the starting point, I would think, Rosemary, from what we actually stated for 25-26 in February. And then we put in everything we've learned since then moving forward. But there's no material budgets, there's no policy stages at this stage, like James has said. So it's the ideal opportunity. We've got enough time now for that task and finish group to actually bring back to scrutiny, which then can bring back to cabinet, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And obviously my first recommendation is that we have the first meeting in a fortnight's time, because I think we've laid out our stall and dropped the glove, so to speak. So hopefully we can have our first meeting in a fortnight. Roger, you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I need to take it back to my group. My group did say by a majority, yes, they would do it. But as a result of seeing some of the papers this morning, some people have changed their mind, because the strip was such short notice and so fundamental a change. It set 1 or 2 alarms ringing. So I need to take it back and consider the position.
Well, that's up to you, Roger, but you've got to be in it to win it. Rosemary.
It's the same story for me, really, that I'm here as leader of a group, not here as an individual. My group has to consider this in terms of the actual proposal that's on the table.
Yeah, okay. And I'll say the same as I said to Roger. I think, you've got to be in, you've got to be in it to win it. So if you want to,
Can I just back in? Sorry,
that's fine.
The one thing I will say is we will change the constitution if we have to this year to not allow alternative budgets. That doesn't stop you producing an alternative budget, but I will stop the process because the officers simply do not have the time. Thank you.
Tony.
I really hope you do. That's all I will say.
Tony.
I think we all appreciate that.
Yeah, so you, Chairman, I don't disagree with that, because the alternative budget did put pressure on officers and we did have difficulty, so.
Yeah, Tony.
Just from my understanding of things, there were likely to be fortnightly meetings leading through until I think December time, and then then a conclusion.
Like
Presumably, we will be allowed to send a sub if someone's not available at every meeting.
I'd rather we didn't.
No.
All right.
I mean, I think I think hopefully there will be a little bit of flexibility about the dates if somebody can't make it. But I think the whole thing about it is that you have to have consistency. Okay. I think that's the thing, and sending subs is that very rarely works. Rosemary.
Yeah, I think if we can make sure that we have a hybrid situation available for the meeting. So I'm assuming they'll be in person by preference.
Yeah.
But if we had a hybrid situation, then because it is relatively short notice.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the way to handle that if we were to go ahead.
Okay.
Can I also just add, Chair, that it would be really helpful, and this is difficult, I know, but I'm doing the same thing. Is that decisions can be made relatively quickly in terms of, I know, if we were looking at putting something in the budget, for instance, you would probably have to talk to your groups about it, but it would be, please, can we do it as quickly as possible? Because I think time is, James will tell you that if he had a pound for every time that I've said the biggest problem we have is time, we wouldn't have an overspend problem, because that is the biggest problem. We just don't have enough time in a year. So, it is about making decisions and making decisions relatively quickly. Yeah.
Could I just make a comment, Claire? Last one.
Yeah.
For both Rosemary and Roger, I think it'd be better to be part of the task and finish group for transparency of everything that's going on. I understand your concerns about the ransom strips, but that's where you'll probably get more information if you're part of the group.
And I think realistically, we are going to have to move quite quickly on a number of things, and that's the nature of the beast. Rosemary.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, thanks for that, Willem. I think the point about the income strip situation is Tony and I came very concerned to the meeting, having read and fully understood the paper. It's clear what was proposed. We understood what was on the paper, but what was on the paper raised a huge number of questions for us. Those were answered during the meeting, and we went with the proposal.
Yeah.
Because we were convinced that it was the right way forward. Having not been involved until the moment we saw that paper, we had a very different view, because we came to it with just what's on black and white.
Yeah.
So we need people to be involved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think we also, as much as we need people to be involved, I mean, there are decisions to be made, and those decisions will need to be made quite quickly.
Sorry, I've already missed 3 meetings now. And that point, Rosemary, is exactly the reason for doing this together, because we can't make those big decisions quickly if you don't have the information.
Okay, so is everyone happy? They're going to take that away to their groups and come back.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Willem. You're a star. Sitting in lovely Ludlow. Take care. Right. Work programme is next. I don't think we need to spend too much time on the work programme. I think we've had a bit of a mammoth session today.
Makes that you just that's it.
Right. Okay.
You combine that with the quarterly monitoring. That group is going to be it.
Okay, and then the next meeting is the 18th of November. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. If we can come off being live, and then Tom wanted a quick word with me, I think. Thank you very much indeed, Jeff.